Thailand retirement woes have been some of the most captivating stories of 2025, so it's only right we give them a proper send-off. Sit back, enjoy, and Happy New Year to everyone. Let's get in to the last video of 2025. Thanks for the support this year from everyone who has watched the channel. I really appreciate it. I thought I was going to Thailand with an open mind. I'd heard all the warnings, watched all the videos, and felt like I knew exactly what I should look out for. The only thing I told myself was, I'm not going to fall for a girl in Thailand. My arrival to Thailand seems to be slightly different to the other stories that you have on your channel. I'm a qualified teacher by trade, and I was getting a bit disillusioned with the way teachers were being treated back at home. So that's when I started looking for opportunities online, in different countries around the world. Being a qualified teacher and a native English speaker means there are opportunities in a big selection of countries. I saw opportunities in China, Japan, and while the salaries that were offered in these countries were slightly higher, I eventually decided on Thailand. I spent a lot of time doing my research, and I was coming quite close to the end of my career. I planned to work for another 5 to 10 years before retiring. This is why I chose Thailand. It seemed like it would be a great place to retire, and after working there for 5 to 10 years, I should have already developed a great knowledge of the country. I was seeking a professional posting. There seemed to be lots of job opportunities for people who were simply native speakers. Those were the low-paying jobs, and that's not what I was looking for. I was looking to work at either a university or an international school, and I contacted an agency that placed teachers in schools. Based on my experience and my qualifications, I was very quickly offered 3 different positions. I chose one at an international school. The salary wasn't too far away from what I was being paid at home, and because of that and all the research I had done, I thought I would be able to have a better life in Thailand than I could have at home. So far, so good. I handed in my notice at the school where I worked. They were all shocked to learn I had decided to move to Thailand. A few of the teachers there seemed to be equally as disillusioned and told me to let them know how it went. Maybe they too would think about doing something like that. Working for the last month, knowing I was going to be leaving soon, was an interesting experience. I liked the school I worked at, but the salary was just too low. I was 51 years old, and I hoped I wasn't doing something that I would later regret. I wondered if I was too old to be moving to a different country to start working. Should I have just worked until retirement at home? Maybe then I could have done some travelling. I put all the doubts to the back of my mind. There was no point thinking like that because the decision had already been made. And I will admit to being extremely excited about the prospects of doing something completely new. I'd never been to Thailand before. I'd never even been to Asia. I knew it was going to be a culture shock. I didn't know how much of a culture shock it would be, but that culture shock in some ways was a positive thing, opening my eyes to something different that I'd never experienced before. I had never married. I got close once, and we were engaged, but we never ended up getting married. We just drifted apart. Both of us came to work on our careers. It just got like we were putting up with each other because separating would be an inconvenience. We'd both need to find new places to live, and there were lots of reasons why it took a long time before we did separate. But we did eventually, and after that I remained single. I never met anybody else, but I wanted to get to know anyone. I would, but I just didn't find anyone. And aside from work, I just buried myself into hobbies that I had always enjoyed. When I left, I rented out my house. I still had a mortgage on it, but the rental income was able to cover that, and in 8 years' time, it should have been fully paid off. That was my retirement plan. It wouldn't have been much, but it would have been enough, and I was hoping to, over the next 5 years to 10 years that I was working, hoping to be able to add to my retirement fund. That's what I was thinking about, and that's what I was planning, and when the day came that I was actually going to be going to Thailand, my friend drove me to the airport. Two very distinct feelings came over me. One of excitement that I was going into the unknown, but the other one was fear and trepidation. What would happen if I didn't like it? What would happen if I got there and it wasn't what I was expecting it to be? Would I be able to come home easily and get another job? I couldn't get the tenants out of my house easily. They'd just signed a 6-month lease. I had nowhere to live if I had to come back. These were all the thoughts I was having, but I did guess that that was normal. This was a brand new start, and it was only natural to feel like this. After I checked in for my flight, I went to the departure area. I found a place to have a couple of shots of whiskey. Flying was something that I never enjoyed, and I was always able to cope with a bit of liquid courage. I bought a book to read on the plane, and when it was finally time to board, and I showed the boarding staff my passport and ticket, that was going to be the last chance I could change my mind. I was thinking about it, and as I walked down the ramp and got on the plane, all the feelings that I had that I was doing the wrong thing disappeared, and all I could think about was the exciting adventure I was about to have. My seat was right at the front of economy, a lot more legroom, so that made a difference, and I was going to have to change planes. The direct flights when I was looking were going to be too expensive, so I just had to accept that the next 18 hours was going to be travelling, and I had to get over that and patiently wait to arrive. I had a person from the agency coming to meet me at the airport in Bangkok. They were holding out a sign with my name, and they whisked me away to an awaiting car. I was glad that they had arranged this, and I didn't have to do it on my own. They took me to the hotel, and Bangkok was everything like I was expecting it to be, times 1,000. Everything you read about, everything you watched, and everything that you'd heard other people talking about Thailand. None of it was an exaggeration. It was all real. And then I thought back to before I boarded the plane and how I was considering changing my mind. I was so glad I didn't, because I was in full and exciting new chapter of my life. But it wasn't without being brave. I didn't get there just by saying one day, "Oh, I'm going to Thailand." It took a lot of careful planning, a lot of research, and it took me a while to be able to force myself to actually follow this dream. It wasn't like it was easy, but it was worth it, and the agency dropped me off at the hotel, and I was due to meet them the following day. I used that first day to enjoy the city. The first place I went was MBK, the shopping mall. I heard everyone talking about that and raving about it. That was a while ago now, before they changed the layout, but it was fun. And after that, I went in a taxi to the famous Khao San Road. I didn't feel like I fit in there. Most of the people you saw walking around, or other foreigners at least, looked a lot younger than me. It was where all the backpackers went, after all, but it was good to see. I went to Chinatown after, and then back to my hotel, which was in Phrom Phong. My first experience of Bangkok, unquestionably the best place I'd ever been, and I realistically thought that that would be the best place I would ever go. How would it be possible that somewhere could be better than this? I didn't believe it was possible. And that was going to be working there. That was going to be a fact. That made things even better. The next day, the agency came to pick me up. They took me to the office and started talking about the procedures for me to get my work permit. They had sent me lots of documents I needed so I could get a business visa from the embassy before I travelled. And they took photocopies of documents and started the process for the work permit. After I had that, I would then be able to extend the visa I had, and I'd be able to legally work in Thailand. I'd read lots of stories about people working as teachers illegally. Most of them said they didn't have any problems, but I wasn't about to do that, especially at my age. With that, I had 2 weeks before I was officially going to start work. I wanted to have some time to have a holiday before getting into my new job, and I was going to be going to a few different places in Thailand. I spent the next couple of days in Bangkok. On my third night, I decided to go and look at the nightlife. I was never interested in nightlife or going out at home, so I was expecting that I would have the same feelings in Thailand. But when I walked from my hotel, about 20 minutes, I found myself on Soy Cowboy. That was a shock on the senses. I would never dream of going somewhere like that at home, or somewhere like that at any country in Europe, but somehow in Thailand it felt different. It felt like it was acceptable to go somewhere like that in Thailand, and seeing so many people there, normal-looking people enjoying themselves. This wasn't some seedy place like you would get in most other countries. This was right in the heart of Bangkok. It wasn't hidden. It was in plain view for everyone to see. I guess that's why when I went into that first bar, I wasn't thinking straight. I was just thinking, live a little. Let's just say I had an amazing time. The following morning, I couldn't get over just how good the night before was. It felt acceptable to be enjoying that type of thing in Thailand. It didn't feel like you weren't meant to go there. If they didn't want people going there, they wouldn't have put it right in the middle of the city with bright flashing lights that you could see from every angle. But I was leaving Bangkok. I booked a flight to go to Phuket. A friend of mine went on his honeymoon there and said it was great, and it was. I hired a motorcycle and toured the island. Lots of tourist sites, but I was drawn to Bangla Road. One of the things I promised myself before I left to go to Thailand was don't get carried away. I knew what happened in Thailand. I didn't even think I would want to go to places like this, but it drew me in. It suckered me in, and the 3 days I spent in Phuket mainly involved me waking up late and going to the bars on Bangla Road. I always thought I was a respectable teacher, well qualified, hard working. Part of me felt out of place going to the bars, but I just reasoned that this was Thailand and this is what you did here, and I let it grab hold of me. I booked a flight up to Chiang Mai next, and I did the same as I did in Phuket. I hired a motorcycle and toured around. Chiang Mai was far better than Phuket if you're interested in riding a bike. The mountain scenery is some of the best I've seen. I did find myself, though, gravitating towards Loi Kraw Road and the bars there. It almost felt like there was something pulling me towards them. If I think back to when I was working as a teacher in England, I could count the times that I went to a bar or pub over the last 10 years on one hand. I just didn't go there. I had no interest in them. But here in Thailand, this was my new calling. And no matter what I tried, I kept going, and I was really enjoying myself. I really loved Chiang Mai. It would become a place I would want to visit again, but I didn't know when I'd get round to that. I got back to Bangkok about 5 days before I was due to start working. The paperwork hadn't come through yet, but it was time for me to find a place to live. I don't want to tell you the area where I lived, because then you might have a guess at which school I worked at, and I don't want that to happen. It would be very obvious if I told you. But I found a 1-bedroom unit, 20-minute walk away. Lots of people talked about how bad the traffic was in Bangkok. I'd experienced that firsthand, so I thought if I could walk to work, that would eliminate any of the problems with traffic. Turns out that was one of the best things I did. When you start making friends with people, finding out that some of them are spending an hour in the Bangkok traffic to go to work, not on a public transport route, so their only choice was to use a taxi. The condo had a pool, but no one ever seemed to use it. But I did. I got a lot of use out of that. And the gym. 30 minutes walking the other direction, I could get to Sukhumvit where the bars were, and I was looking forward to spending a few evenings a week going to the bars. I started work, and I loved it immediately. I got my work permit about a week after that, and extended my visa. So easy to do anything after that. I got my bank account opened, and I started to settle into my new life. I was paid quite well. Don't want to say how much, but it was very close to what I was earning at home, and I just found out how much more affordable it was to live in Thailand, although I found myself going Thai whenever possible when it came to choosing what to eat for lunch or dinner. I'd finish work around 4:30, go back to my condo and try to wind down. But over the first few months, I found that as soon as I was getting home, I was going straight to the bars. They were drawing me in, and I couldn't stop myself, but I was enjoying myself, and I was spending an amount of money that although I didn't really want to spend, I was hoping to save a big portion of my salary, I wasn't spending more than what I got from my salary. I hoped I would get bored of it, but I never did. Every time I would go to the bars, I'd fall in love with another one of the girls, and then you go to another bar and immediately stop thinking about her and fall in love with another. That all changed when I met the girl who I would eventually marry. When I met her, I knew that I liked her, and I was mentally trying to force myself to run away. That was the thing I promised myself when I left. Don't fall for a girl in Thailand, especially a girl like this. But I couldn't help myself. Not long after, she's living with me in the condo. She was 32, 2 children, and an ex-husband who she said was in jail. She moved from her village when he went to jail, got a divorce from him, and started working in the bar to support her children. They lived with her aging parents in Buriram. I couldn't even picture what kind of life she had. It was so different to mine, but she was a breath of fresh air for me. The dynamic of the relationship was so different to the relationship I had with my ex-partner. In my old relationship, we both worked. It felt like an equal partnership. But this didn't feel like that. It was very one-sided. It was clear that I was the provider, I was the one who worked and had to pay for everything and take care of her and her children, and it was her job to be the best partner she could be. If I say that again more accurately, it was clear that I was the provider, I was the one who worked and had to pay for everything and take care of her and her children. It was her job to do absolutely nothing. I didn't see it like that at the time. What I found happening was that when I got home from work, instead of going to the bars by myself, we went to more local places together. This cost less money, and it was with this saving that I was able to help her financially and her children. If I think about what I was really doing, I was sacrificing my own enjoyment and entertainment. I wasn't going to the bars anymore. I was still spending the same amount of money, but I had her. She had a great way of making me feel like I wanted to feel though, and the relationship just flourished. After 6 months, we got married. I even had some of my friends fly out from England to come to the wedding. This was likely the only time I would ever be married, and I wanted to do it right. We didn't do the normal go up to her village and have a ceremony type of thing. We booked a venue in Bangkok and paid for her family to come down and stay for a few days. It worked better for everyone that way, or at least it did for me, and as soon as we were married, I felt an even deeper connection to her and to the country of Thailand, and I'd fallen in love with Thailand just as much as her. The thing I liked most about her was that she never seemed to get angry. She had a very mai pen rai attitude, and if you know what that means in Thai, it's kind of like never mind or don't worry about it. It made for an easy existence. I didn't get home to nagging, I got home to her smiling. Sometimes she'd cook, but most of the time we'd go to one of the local restaurants close by. I'm still thoroughly enjoying work, feeling like it's the best thing I ever did moving to Thailand, and when it was the holidays, we would go to different places in Thailand together, and life felt like I'd always dreamed life would feel. If I sat down and thought about it, I was there, living in Thailand, working in an international school, married to a perfect lady. What more could I possibly want? I was content at that moment, and I was for the first 2 years of our relationship. During those 2 years, I did witness her change ever so subtly, and I've been thinking of the best way to describe this. When I met her, let's say that she was 100 out of 100. After the first 6 months, she was still 100 out of 100. 8 months, she's down to 99. 12 months, 97. 2 years, 93. And she's like changing, or is she moving closer to who she really is? That's something I often think about and try to understand. After 2 years of living in the same condo, doing the same things, that was when she came to me and said, we should start thinking about buying our own place to live. I hadn't even considered that. I asked her, what did she mean? What did she have in mind? She said, why don't we look for a house? It would be bigger, we'd be able to stretch our legs more there, and it would solidify our relationship even more. I already thought that our relationship was solidified, but because she's asking and I'm prepared to go and look. We quickly found out that anything we could afford was too far away from the school where I worked. That would take my daily commute far away from what I considered acceptable. She understood that. She probably thought there was no point trying to push it because I wasn't going to buy a house too far away from where I worked. You always have the chance that you're going to have a different job at some point, and maybe that would be further away. If I did ever change job, I planned to change condos and move closer. I said, what about buying a condo? But she didn't like the sound of that. She said condos are okay to live in temporarily, but as a permanent home that you own, somewhere you had to grow old in, you should really have a house. That conversation stopped, and it wasn't talked again for a long time, and a year later, I was actually offered another job. It was paid about 25% more than I was already being paid, so I had to jump at that opportunity. It was on the other side of the city, close to Rangsit, and when looking for somewhere else to live, she brought up again the possibility of buying a house. She said that there were more affordable houses in Rangsit, and that shouldn't be too far away for me to go every day to work. I was hesitant at first, but it did make sense. We had it arranged that because I worked in Thailand and had a work permit, we could get a mortgage, but it would have to be in her name. I would then pay for the mortgage. After a lot of looking around, in the few weeks before I was due to start the job, we found the perfect house, and it was only a 10-minute drive away from the school. I was really hesitant, thinking this might not be the best thing to do. But to make her happy, I agreed, and we applied for the mortgage in her name using my income. We had to move into a hotel temporarily until we found out if we were accepted or not. And about a week after starting my new job, we were informed by the bank that it had been approved and the house could be ours. My wife was very happy, as you'd expect her to be. I had to pay the equivalent of about £10,000 as a deposit, approximately 450,000 baht at the time. That was a 15% down payment. The house was 3 million baht. It probably spent the same again, another £10,000, on getting everything we needed for the house. And I also had to buy a cheap car so I could use it to go to work. I was enjoying my new job, but it was taking longer than 10 minutes to get there in the mornings. The traffic on the road around there in the mornings and evenings was bedlam, a complete nightmare to get to work, but it wasn't that bad, initially. I was prepared to accept it because my wife seemed to be very happy with the fact that we had a new house now. The payments we had to make were quite high. They amounted to about 35% of my salary. That's a lot more than we were paying in rent, but we did take the mortgage for only 10 years. I had to extend the amount of time I planned to work, but after 10 years, and it was paid off, I should then be able to retire. On top of having to pay off the mortgage, I was also giving approximately the same amount of this to my wife. She used that for her day-to-day living expenses and to take care of her children, and now her aging parents also needed financial assistance, so we were able to look after them as well. After paying for the rest of the bills, we didn't have much left over to go out and eat as much like we used to do. And while it was fun having the house, cooking there every day wasn't what I went to Thailand for. But we had to do it in order to save money. The new situation I found myself in, it did get boring fast. While I was okay with the drive to work and back when we moved in, after 6 months I'd had enough. I didn't want to be battling traffic every morning and evening, and it started feeling depressed because of it. It was also taking a toll at work. My wife didn't know what it was like. I had to wake up in the morning while she stayed in bed. I had to make my own breakfast and drive to work. I'd send her a message when I was at work, and often she wouldn't read it, for 30 minutes to an hour because she'd still be asleep. When she'd finally wake up, she'd message me telling me to have a good day, and then she would just exist for the rest of the day, living in her house, without any purpose, without any stress or worry. I started to resent her a little bit because of that, but I was still madly in love with her, and I was prepared to accept that I was doing, even though I hated it, I was doing it for her, to make her happy. Making her happy was what life became about. There was nothing else I wanted to do. When I'd drive home in the evening, she'd be sitting watching the TV, can't even bother to get dressed, still wearing her sleeping clothes, and sometimes she would cook, but sometimes I found that I would have to cook. I liked to cook, but it would have been nice if she understood that I was working all day, but she didn't seem to think about it. 2 months after this, I had a problem. I was let go unexpectedly from work. I got a little bit of money for severance, but that was only enough to see us for 2 months, and now we had a house. I knew I could get another job, that I could find one, but could I find one within distance of where we lived? The worries I had just come true. What I told her could happen, did happen. But when I told her at the time that this could happen, she just brushed it off, didn't even think about it as being a problem. But now it had happened, she seemed to be upset. But it wasn't her who needed to solve this problem. She didn't need to sort it out. I was offered another job about 3 weeks after this, but the salary was less than I was being paid, about 10% less, but I had to take it. We needed the money. I put what money I had into the deposit for the house and things we needed for the house and car. I didn't have any emergency funds. My emergency fund was my house in England, which the tenants were still paying off. But I wasn't meant to need that until I retired. The job was too far away to be able to live in the house. I had to rent a very small room close to the school. I told my wife we can live here in the week, and at the weekends we can go to our house. It was only about £100 a month, this room. You had to be cheap, because not only was I being paid less money, I still had all the same obligations as I had before. My wife said that was okay, but after 2 weeks of her staying in the room with me, she said she'd just stay at our house and I could see her at the weekends. That felt like betrayal. I told her I wasn't happy with that, and I told her basically, what you're saying is, I have to live in this awful room by myself, I have to wake up really early to go to work, I have to work as hard as I can, and then have to return to the same room by myself, and to save money, I have to go out and buy cheap street food, and I don't have any money for entertainment or anything else. And I'm doing that, and at the same time, I'm paying for the mortgage for your house, which is a lot nicer than this room, and you're living in it. Is that acceptable? That was the first time we really did argue, and she said that she would compromise. She spent a lot of time with me, but sometimes she might want a bit of time in the house by herself. That's the arrangement we had. She seemed to change then. Not in a bad way. She actually became more loving and more affectionate. I think she could see what I was doing, and I really appreciated that she seemed to be trying harder. It made me fall in love with her all over again, and I was grateful that she was playing the part of a wife and supporting me in my job of making sure we had enough money to pay for things. I was struggling through. It was so boring not being able to do anything in the evenings. The place where I lived was awful, but it was within walking distance of the school. My wife was trying so hard. She could see I was still struggling, and it was around this time when we were at her house at the weekend once that she said she had a great idea. She knew I had a house in England. She said, why don't we sell that? We can then pay off the mortgage on our house in Thailand, and that would mean that we had money to spend every month. The mortgage payment now was close to 40% of what I was earning. When she said that, I just thought, no way, I'm not doing that. But as the weeks went by and I'm really struggling to stay positive, when she mentioned it again, I do start to consider it. Thinking about not having to pay the mortgage, all of a sudden I'd be able to live again. I could rent a slightly bigger place. I could go out in the evenings and enjoy myself again. I gave it some long and hard thought, but on a particularly hard day, when I got back to the room I'm living in around 4:30, and the guy who's living in the room below starts cooking on the balcony of his room. There are no cooking facilities, nothing to take away the smell, and he's just using one of those portable hobs on the balcony, and the smell of cooking oil, which smelled like it had been used a lot more than once, was enough to drive me insane. So I called my wife and told her, I think it's a good idea, let's do that. First things first, I need to give notice to the people living in my house, and I would need to make sure that I had enough money to cover the mortgage payments for the house while it was for sale. It was a bit of a juggling act, but 6 months later, my solicitor transferred the proceeds from the sale to my bank account in Thailand. I can remember when it arrived. I took a few days off work and just tried to reset. We went to Hua Hin to try to completely turn off, and we had 3 great days there. We didn't spend a lot of money, We just stayed in a normal hotel, eating normal Thai street food, but to be able to have a change of scenery and to plan exactly what we were going to do without all the stress and worry of not earning enough money, living somewhere I didn't want to live, and having a house that was too far away for the daily commute. That was all forgotten about, and we decided to pay off the mortgage that we had in Thailand. That used up about 70% of the money that I got from the proceeds of my house in England. Immediately, it made a huge difference. That 40% of my salary was now available to me. I should have thought about what I was doing. I was still planning to retire in a few years' time, but all I had now was a house in my wife's name and the remainder of the money from the house. It wasn't a lot, but I didn't really think about it because I had my time back to enjoy myself. I rented a more suitable condo close to the school where I worked, and that made a big difference. My wife was more than happy to stay with me now, which was good. In the evenings, I got back into the routine of just going out and having something to eat and living the Thailand life that I'd enjoyed so much before. When I got back into living like this, I did start to feel like maybe I'd made a mistake. The mortgage for the house in England would have been paid off in approximately 6 or 7 years' time, and then I could have got a basic income just by renting it out. Now, what was I going to do for retirement? I talked to my wife about this, and she just said, "Don't worry, we'll think of something." Anything that involved thinking about the future, she wasn't interested in. She was only interested in now. One of the problems, though, that I'm now facing is that even though I don't have the mortgage to pay for the house, I am slowly eating into the remainder of the money. I think it would be best to invest this into something. I wondered if it would be enough to buy a cheap condo, but it wasn't. And my wife had an idea which sounded great. Why don't we rent out the house that we have in Rangsit and then use that money to buy another house with a mortgage, and the rent that we get from that house in Rangsit could pay for the mortgage on the new house. That way, when time comes for me to retire, we should have 2 houses, one that we live in and one we rent out. It wasn't going to give us a full living renting out a house, but it would be enough to cover the absolute basics. It did sound a bit risky, but I'd seen in England just how well it worked when my mortgage was being paid off by the people who rented the house. If we did that in Thailand, maybe that would be my answer to a good retirement. We would need to live in this house, and again I said, why don't we buy a condo instead? But she said we could probably get more money for a house. The problem was, the school that I worked at was quite central. It would not be possible for us to get a house an acceptable distance away. And then she said, well, that doesn't matter. We could buy another house and rent that one out as well. Then we can pay the mortgage off with the house we've got even quicker. That was like a light bulb moment. Why hadn't I thought of that? That seemed to make perfect sense. I would still need to rent, but I wouldn't be out of pocket because of it. So after a few weeks of careful thinking, I agreed that it would be best idea for us to buy another house. I didn't want to use all the money for a deposit, but I used approximately 80% of what I had left as a down payment on a house, very close to the one we had. Biggest mistake I ever made. Maybe we should have tried to rent out the first house before we bought the second. I didn't think to do that, and my wife never mentioned it. But when we contacted some agents and the house was listed for rent, we had no inquiries. None. We put the price down, and still none. We put the price down again, and there were still no inquiries. We'd just taken possession of another house, which had a big mortgage payment. And we're not finding anyone to rent the first house. It was put on at an acceptable price, but no one's biting. Then we put the other one for rent, and no one is renting that either. That's when I started to completely freak out. The emergency bit of money that I had would run out very soon. Somehow, over the next month though, we did manage to find tenants for both houses. Whether it was just extremely fortunate, or if it was extremely fortunate times 2, that was a lifesaver. We weren't renting them out for what we expected to get though. That was a problem. It wasn't even close. When they were both rented out, it just about paid for the new mortgage we had. We just hoped the people would remain in. A month later, I was offered another job, completely out of nowhere, and it was paid very well. It would be a 40% increase. That would be enough for me to make extra payments towards the mortgage, and if I really saved, we could get it paid off in 2 years. 2.5 years later, it was paid off, and now we had 2 houses that we owned outright. Should I say my wife had 2 houses that she owned outright? That would be more accurate. They were both getting 14,000 baht a month in rent. We were expecting them to get closer to 25. But it was something. If we left one for rent, we would still have enough to pay electric, internet, water, common fees for the development, petrol for the car, and a bit extra. We would need more than double that in retirement, but I was emboldened by the fact I was earning better money, and we decided to buy another. My dreams of retiring 5 years after arriving in Thailand didn't come true, and over the course of the next 3 years, we fully paid off the mortgage on a 3rd house. I worked for another year, saving money, and then I retired. My dream to retire came true. I wasn't going to have a lot of money to spend in retirement, but I thought I'd have enough to be able to live with my wife, and I thought that was good enough. Her children had left home by now, therefore we didn't need to support them anymore, and we moved into one of the houses after giving up the place I rented in the city, and we rented out the other 2. It was hard to find people to rent them. With what I had managed to save, we were able to spend 30,000 baht a month. Not a lot of money, but that's just what it was. Part of me was happy that I was retired, but after only 2 months of living that existence, I quickly realised that while we could live on that amount of money that we had coming in, it was no way to live. And because I wasn't working, I had my whole days available, and not enough money to be able to do anything that I wanted to do. I thought I would be okay, because I was retired and I didn't have to do anything. But there were things I did want to do, and I couldn't do them. Then a month later, somebody moves out of one of the houses that we had renting. We can't find anybody else. Then people move out of the other house. We've now got 2 empty houses, and no matter what we're doing, we can't find anybody to rent them. It is very hit or miss in Thailand. If you are buying, make sure you know what you're doing. I trusted my wife because she was Thai, and I thought she said it was a good area. Now my savings are dwindling too fast, and we keep dropping the price. We dropped the price for both houses to 10,000 baht before we had people looking, but that was such a small return on the amount that we put into them. Even if we rented both out, that would only be 20,000 a month, and we had 1,000 baht a month for each to pay for the community charge in the development, so we'd only be left with 18. This is when my world started to crumble. I'm starting to get upset about things and panicking, and my wife is starting to get angry with me. You should not have left work, she kept telling me. Why did you think you could retire? I couldn't believe she was saying that. I was already in my 60s, I'd worked my whole life, and all I had to show for it were 3 houses in Rangsit on the outskirts of Bangkok that were in my Thai wife's name. She started getting angry more and more. You need to go back to work, go and find another job. I was furious when she told me that. I'd waited my whole life to be able to retire. I didn't want to get back into that grind. When I said, why don't you get a job? She said, okay, I go back work in bar. Never mind the fact she was already in her 40s, but saying that felt like a huge betrayal. I kept trying to tell her that we have 3 houses and they belong to you. Why don't we sell one of them? She didn't like the sound of that, but the writing was on the wall. If we didn't sell one of the houses, we wouldn't be able to survive. We paid about 3 million for each of the houses, so we listed one for sale at the same price. 6 months goes by and nobody's interested. My savings are going down and down, so we have to reduce the price. First to 2.8 million, then to 2.6, and still nobody's looking. Then COVID hit. It was going to be very difficult to sell a house now, and at this point, because no one's rented one, we found ourselves living in different houses. She wasn't the same anymore. As soon as there were money problems, as soon as I wasn't able to provide in the way she thought I should, she changed, considerably, and overnight. But we did have 3 houses, a total of 9 million baht of assets. At that moment, if I could have taken 5 for the lot and run, I would have done. But they weren't mine, and there was so much uncertainty because of COVID. I was panicking, shaking when I thought about what had happened. By this point, most of the savings that I had gone, completely, and I suggested we do a fire sale on one of the houses. If we put it down to something ridiculous like 2 million, somebody's surely going to buy it then. But she said there was no way she was going to do that. I told her that's our only option, but she wasn't hearing it. She didn't want to know. I remember having that conversation, and then I stormed out of the house and walked down to the street to the other one. There should have been a tenant in it, but there wasn't. I can remember thinking, if something doesn't happen soon, my whole world is going to collapse. I couldn't believe what I saw the following morning when I went back to the house when she was there. I couldn't sleep all night, so I went round around 5 a.m. I was never up that early, and I saw a motorbike parked outside. I went in, and there was a guy, looking like he was just about to leave, and a look on my wife's face like, "What are you doing here so early?" She started cheating on me as soon as we had money problems. "I told you I would do this," she said. "You should have gone to get another job. What do you want me to do? I need money to live." In all the time I spent with her, I'd never heard I. It was always we, or us, and she looked proud on her face that I'd caught her. Like, this is what you get when you do wrong by me. I just stood there in amazement. I was panicking about the financial situation, and COVID happened, and we couldn't find anyone to rent the 2 houses, and we couldn't sell them. I wanted to reduce the price of one dramatically, but she just refused. When that guy left, I tried talking to her. She wasn't crying or upset or apologetic. She was just laughing and giddy. "You think I only do one time?" she said to me. "I do like this because you do not good to me." I shouted at her at the top of my voice. "I bought you 3 houses. You're my wife, and I've taken care of you ever since we met. What more could I have done?" Then she starts talking about how I should look for another job, or I should never have given up on the job in the first place. And it was the way that she was showing off that she cheated on me. She said she liked that guy and he was better than me. She then told me to get out. She didn't want to speak to me then. I had no choice but to walk back to the other house, completely broken and with no idea what to do. When I got back to the house where I had to live, and the realization I had about £2,000 to my name, that's when it really hits home. I had the perfect wife until she decided she didn't want to play that part anymore. Was she always like that? Was she playing the part of a perfect wife for years and years just because there was money coming in? I don't know, but I knew that I would need to go and talk to her and decide what to do. I went back half an hour later, and I said, "Can we try to work things out?" As much as I was hating her in the moment, I did understand that everything I had and my life was based on trying to get her to come round. But she just said, "You know money, why do I stay with you?" "Have you always felt like that?" I asked her. And she said, "Why do you think I stay with you? Why do you think I do nice to you? Because you have money to share with me. Now you know money, so why am I nice to you?" I thought about getting another job, but schools were not hiring at the moment. Could I teach online? All these thoughts coming up. But I decided I wasn't able to work. I was too mentally exhausted, and she'd hurt me more than I'd ever been hurt. She said, "You go home. We not stay together anymore." "What about the houses?" "They're mine," she said. "They're in my name." I told her that we're married, and even though they're in her name, if we went to court, she would be forced to sell them and give me half. She looked at me and she laughed. "What money you pay for lawyer," she said. That was when I realised that I really didn't have a leg to stand on. I didn't have enough money to take her to court, and I didn't even have enough money to do pretty much anything. I'd worked for years in Thailand, dreaming of retirement, and now my retirement was non-existent. I tried over the next few weeks to get her to see sense, saying if we sold one of the houses, we'd have enough money, but she wasn't prepared to drop the price low enough to get someone to buy it quickly. I would have taken 50% of the money if I paid for one of the houses, if I could have, but it was up to her, and she wasn't having it. Not only that, I went round to the house once at a normal time during the day, and that guy was there again. He left when I arrived, and my wife just looked at me smiling. "He better than you," she said. "I think better you leave," she said. I begged her to change her mind, but it just wasn't happening, and I knew I had to leave. I packed my things into a bag, all the little things I could carry, and I got a taxi to a hotel in downtown Bangkok. I still clung to the hope that she would call me, saying she was sorry and telling me to go back home. We can sell one of the houses for a fire sale. But she didn't, and realising that all I had left was enough for a plane ticket, and the plane tickets were more expensive now because of what was going on, that was all I was able to do. All I could do was fly back home, completely defeated and with nothing left. I'd lost everything. I did think twice that when I got back and things started to improve for me, I would then get in touch with a lawyer and take my wife to court. She couldn't divorce me without me being there, and that was my plan. I flew back to England a few days later. I was in tears. I was a former shadow of myself, devastated that I'd allowed this to happen. I didn't even have anywhere to live when I got back, but I had to borrow some money for a friend, £2,000, and I bought a really old camper van and lived in that. Luckily in England you can claim benefits, although technically you're not meant to if you've been abroad, but they didn't know and I had no choice, and it was 6 months before I was living in an actual house. I then reached out to a lawyer in Thailand, telling them what had happened and about my predicament. He said he'd look into it, and I gave him my wife's number and told him that she owns these 3 houses that I bought, and we're legally married, and I've got proof of me spending money on things. I wanted to get a divorce, and I wanted the houses sold, and I wanted half. I left it with him, and he got back in touch with me a week later. The news wasn't good. He told me that my wife had already transferred ownership of the properties to her children. He said I could still take her to court, but he's going to be in for a huge battle. It could take years and years, and even longer because of the current situation, and the chances are you're probably not going to get anything. I could see the lawyer felt sorry for me. He told me not to worry about it, and he even told me not to send his fee that I'd agreed to pay for the work. That was the first time I had ever seen anybody in Thailand do anything like that. I must have really been in a bad state. I never did get anything. When I realised just how far I'd fallen, I looked back at all those years of hard work and effort and realised that they were all for nothing, for absolutely nothing. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. You've heard all the warnings, you've listened to the stories, people have explained to you the pitfalls of what can happen. Don't be like me and think you know best. You don't. I most definitely didn't. If only your channel would have been available, I may not have been through hell in Thailand. I didn't think I was anything special, a normal guy who worked all his life, finally ready to retire. I didn't think things could go so wrong. It's not only about that. I feel like I've lost my trust in people. I didn't know people could be so cruel and wicked. I guess it's a double-edged sword. You have people, like my wife, who completely destroyed me. And you also have people who will destroy me for opening up and letting the world know what happened to me. I guess I can't win. But the thought of somebody else having to go through what I went through is enough alone to share what happened. I've been enjoying your channel, but I do wish I'd seen your channel and I could have used it to save myself. I had to eventually leave Thailand, and that was at the start of 2019. And it's taken me until around about now to get back on my feet. But any dreams of being retired are dreams only. Please be kind if you're listening to my story. It's a difficult thing to share, but I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart, hoping it will have some resonance with someone who is close to getting themselves into a situation that they should not be in. With that being said, I want to take it back to the beginning, and I'll tell you how I found myself in Thailand and also how everything went wrong. I fully understand that most people are going to think it's my fault. I just didn't know how some people could do the things they did. I don't think it's my fault, although I would have done things differently if I'd have known just how cruel people can be. I spent most of my life as a dreamer. I felt like I was working a job that was beneath me and beneath my level of intellect. I just wanted some form of security, but at least I would have a job to do every day. I never had the confidence to go out on my own. As much as I wanted to, I don't think I could have handled the pressure of working for myself, and I think that's what holds many people back. We tend to take security even if that means limiting ourselves, even over our dreams that we hold. So in my job as a postman, I enjoyed the solitude and the fact I was able to daydream while working. I dreamed about everything, escaping this life into a new one, travelling the world, and finding myself a girlfriend that I thought would go well together with me. The girlfriends that I had in my life always seemed to be different than the girls I dreamed about. It wasn't only about the looks, it was about their actions and behaviour that led me to believe that in the West we have completely moved away from traditional gender roles. It did make me envious of people like my grandparents. Imagine how good that would have been. But now we see all kinds of sordid things that women get up to, and the fact they're proud of it and not embarrassed by it really does go to show that the world is moving away from any sense of normality. With the views that I held, that meant I was unsuccessful at finding a serious girlfriend at home. It seems to be the case with many people. You have to find out about Thailand somehow, especially when many of us guys don't use social media. I avoided Facebook like the plague. Everything to do with social media, and the more social media came into existence, the more difficult life seemed to be. Before social media, things seemed to be far more simple, but it did mean that a chance encounter with an old school friend at a pub close to where our school used to be would change the direction of my life completely. I thought I was still 5 years away from retirement. I had recently paid off the mortgage, and I was counting down the days until I could retire for good. I was sat at the bar, and when he walks in with this beautiful girl by his side, I'd guess that we were both 50 at this moment in time, and the girl he was with was 30. She didn't look like she came from here, and he told me he met her in Thailand and recently brought her back. He started talking about how he was planning to retire to Thailand when they saved enough money. He said they already had a house in the village where she came from, and they had a car parked up waiting for them when they got back. He also said he had a condo in Bangkok. I didn't know what he meant by a condo, but he said it was similar to an apartment. He seemed to really be living his best life. He ran his own business, and he was talking about how Thailand has changed his life and just how much better it was than home. I vowed to go home and look into Thailand myself. When I started doing some Googling, the first thing I encountered was a forum. They seemed to be tens of thousands of users, and everyone was asking questions about Thailand and giving information about Thailand and the different places to live and other useful help and information that people wanting to move to Thailand were able to look at. I started reading Thailand news sites like the Bangkok Post and The Nation, and I think the best way to describe it was like I felt like I was part of this special club that not many people knew about. Because I bumped into my old friend, he let me on his little secret to know about Thailand, and everything that I read about and everything that I saw made me want to go and see if I could do what he managed to do. I didn't know how to go about it. Should I just book a ticket and go and see and look into what it's all about? That is often the case. You're nervous before you make a big decision like that. But on my next break from work, I just jumped the gun and went to Thailand for 2 weeks. I think many of the people that find themselves in Thailand are looking for something similar that they just can't find in their own country. In a way, it's like a hollow emptiness that sticks with you when you're at home. It seemed like everything that I read online and people sharing their stories about going to Thailand, it sort of filled the void that I was feeling. When I told some work colleagues I was going to Thailand, all of them reacted in a way like I was going to some exotic location. None of the people I worked with had ever been to Thailand, and I'm not saying that it's an unpopular destination for people to travel to, but at this moment in time, it felt like a place that you had to know about in order to go. I'm not talking about going for a normal holiday. I'm talking about being in the know that you can go and live there and how much more affordable it is and how much things you can do there that you wouldn't be able to do at home. That's what attracted me to Thailand. It wasn't necessarily for the weather or the culture or the food or the temples. It was to go and find out whether Thailand was going to be somewhere that could improve the quality of my life substantially without me having to do anything apart from go there. I got the first impressions as many of the stories I'd listened to and read. By this point, I must have read or listened to hundreds of different stories, and the ones from guys who seem like Thailand all say the same thing when they get there. That's this overarching acceleration that you feel inside you when you set off the plane. Firstly into the heat, then walking through the airport and getting stamped in, collecting your bag from the carousel, and walking through customs and finding yourselves in Thailand. The blast of heat as you exit the airport, get yourself a taxi, and driving on the tollway into the heart of the city of Bangkok in awe of all the sights and sounds. My first experience was no different to this. I was only planning on being in Thailand for 2 weeks. I considered this to be a fact-finding mission. Was Thailand actually as good as all these people said it was? Or was I not going to like it? That was a big part of me that was scared that I wasn't going to like it. I had thought about Thailand at this point for months, and I really did think it was going to be the answer to all my problems. The problems I had in my life of being bored, not living life to the full, and not finding a girlfriend that lived up to my expectations, maybe Thailand would fix everything that was broken in my life. Bangkok was something else. The busiest place I had ever been, the hottest place I had ever been, and the most humid place I had ever been. Just getting out of the taxi and walking into the hotel 10 meters away, and you're already starting to sweat. But that experience of heat, it stops immediately when you walk into the cold air-conditioned hotel lobby and the friendly staff welcoming you in with a smile on their face, as opposed to the cold looks you get when you do anything at home. It makes you feel like you're welcome in Thailand. It makes you feel like you're wanted there and respected for making the time and effort to go. That's something I need to touch on and clarify. You are made to feel so extremely welcome in Thailand. But when you get to a point of living there and trying to settle in, you don't feel welcome in that case. You always feel like you're on the outside looking in, and you can never be actually part of the country. But this is something I found out later at my peril. I'm not saying that Thailand is two-faced, but what I am saying that in order to be in Thailand and live there, you've got to sacrifice your dignity and rights in order to benefit from what Thailand has to give. You may be able to do all kinds of things in Thailand that you can't do at home, but in return, you're not allowed to do things that we take for granted at home, such as land ownership and the right to work, and everything that most people need in order to live a normal life. When I was in Thailand on that first day, I wasn't thinking about any of this. I was just happy to be there and happy to test if what everything I had read about and seen up until this point was true. A few places kept coming up on the internet forum, and of course, those were the first places I had to go to. Soy Cowboy, Nana Plaza were the best places I'd ever been. I couldn't believe what I was seeing around me, and I was so excited to be there. All around that part of Bangkok was everything I hoped it would be, times 10. And for the next few days and nights, I lived every single part of the best of Bangkok, and I could see why my old school friend loved Thailand. For the rest of the holiday, I was in Pattaya. There seemed to be mixed reviews about Pattaya, and I didn't know if I was going to like it, because some guy said it was the worst place in Thailand, yet others said it was the best place in Thailand. I quickly found out that I was one of the people who loved it. Bars everywhere, a beach, great restaurants with cuisines from anywhere. What more could any single guy want who wasn't able to find someone in his own country that met his high expectations? There is nothing better than what I was seeing in Pattaya. It made the thought of returning home feel like some kind of cruel joke. Imagine having to leave this and go back to that normal, boring existence. I didn't like the sound of that. I didn't want to go back, but I knew I would have to. The thing that came from the 2-week trip was that yes, Thailand is more affordable at home, but it also struck me that you could get carried away if you were living a single life there, so I thought that the most sensible thing to do, if I ever did move there, would be to find a girlfriend and settle down. When you're there as a tourist for a few weeks, you don't mind spending a lot of money. But if you're living there, you couldn't go out every single night to the bars unless you had a lot of money. So finding a girl would be the best and cheapest option in order to live in Thailand long term. But what I did know was that that's where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be at home anymore, and when I returned and got back to work, I got into a really big depression like I'd never experienced before. All I could think about was going back to Thailand and retiring there. I just didn't have enough money to retire. If I sold my house and my car and every single thing I owned, I could raise enough money to spend potentially 10 years in Thailand. That might not be enough to see me out for the rest of my life, but I did think if I'd spent 10 years there, somehow I would be able to find something to do to make some money. Work for another 5 years could mean I might be able to save some more money and then retire, but I wouldn't be able to travel to Thailand every year because that would wipe out anything I saved during the whole year. So you work for a whole year, spend 2 weeks in Thailand and have nothing else to show for it. That was my reasoning for deciding to pack everything in and go straight to Thailand. It was because I knew if I worked more and I wanted to have a 2-week holiday, I wouldn't save any money. So what was the point of giving 5 years of my life for nothing? There was no point doing that, and I might as well just go to Thailand now. I was old enough to qualify for an extension of stay based on retirement, with the fact that I was 50, and with the money I should be able to live for 10 years. And that's not sacrificing living, that's finding a girlfriend, renting a condo that should have a pool and gym, and going out to eat 3 times a week, doing shopping and cooking at home, and going out for beers, and generally having a good lifestyle. It wasn't enough for me to live on the interest that the money would provide. That would have barely seen me living a subsistence lifestyle, so I thought 10 years living and worry about that later. That was my justification, and I packed everything in at work, telling them I'm never coming back. I'm going to be going full-time to Thailand, and that's where I plan to stay until my eventual demise. I thought people would have reacted more positively, like saying, "Good for you, I wish I was brave enough to do something like that." You know, positive reinforcement that I was doing the right thing. But people looked at me like I was making a bad decision and I should continue to work and not enjoy myself. I wasn't prepared to do that anymore, and I just took it that they were the ones who hadn't had that light bulb moment yet, that life was actually for living and enjoying, not for suffering through work you didn't want to do. I put my house on the market and sold my car, and then it was a waiting game. 3 months later, though, I had all the money in the bank, and I went to the Thai consulate to get the initial retirement visa, which I would need to extend when I got to Thailand. Once I had that arranged, I just booked a ticket to Thailand, but I did have a plan of action. I wasn't going with no plan. It was my aim to stay in Bangkok for a few days and enjoy myself. Then go down to Pattaya, spend a week in a hotel, enjoying myself, and then once I've got that week out of my system, look for a place to rent and find out about extending the visa, and then try to get into a new routine. I knew I wouldn't be able to go to the bars every single day. That's what I would have liked to have done, and that's why I was thinking I needed to find a girlfriend. If I didn't have a girlfriend and I would be out every day, I wouldn't be able to make my money last long enough, so that was a problem. But if I did have a girlfriend that was living with me, I wouldn't have the need to go out as much, therefore it should be a lot cheaper. That made sense to me, and that's what I thought about. I had heard stories saying you should never meet a girl in a bar. I just didn't know where else to meet a girl, and I thought it was okay, as long as I understood what the game was, and as long as they understood that once they were with me, they no longer able to go back to that way of life. That was my reasoning with myself, and I just hoped things would work out. I did as planned, flying to Bangkok, spending 3 days in the same hotel that I stayed at last time, and I can tell you that feeling of arriving in Thailand and thinking you're going to be there for good, I'd never experienced anything as exhilarating as that, up until that moment. And I was over 50. It made me upset to think that this was the pinnacle of my life, and it made me think that I wished I'd enjoyed myself when I was younger, because that would have been even better being in Thailand when I was 20 or 30, and I'd heard stories of Thailand and how it was a different place and a lot better for expats then. But I wasn't complaining with the Thailand I found myself in, because it was still great. Those 3 days in Bangkok were a bit of a blur now. I was trying to get as much fun and excitement of being there out of my system, so I don't think I was sober for the whole 3 days, exploring all the bars of Bangkok and just having the best time I'd ever had. I did then go down to Pattaya, and I spent a week as though I had to leave at the end of that week. And as I said, it was just to get it out of my system. I enjoyed it as much as I could, and I got to a point where I knew it was available, but I didn't feel like I needed to go and do that every night. I had another tremendous week, and looking back at that moment, I think that was the best week I'd ever had in my life. There wasn't a week before that, and there hasn't been a week since that comes close to just how fun it was, and I wish I could experience it again. But, true to my word, I did rent a place to live in Pattaya after the first week. It was only a small one-bedroom, but it did have a pool and a gym, which is what I wanted. Plus, it was only a short walk away from downtown Pattaya. I knew that I could easily get carried away if I wasn't careful, and in the first few months, I was allowing myself one night a week in the bars. I was just finding it wasn't enough. I was waiting 6 days for that one special day, and during those 6 days, I was getting restless and I was missing the scene. After the first few months, I was going to the bars every 2 days, and then it became every 3. And that made me think back to the idea that if I found somebody, I wouldn't need to be out all the time because I'd have someone at home with me to spend time with, and therefore I could save a lot of money. I spent a lot of money in the first 3 months. I guess I spent 3 times more than I had allocated for myself, and that was the first realization that Thailand, although it can be cheap, it's not cheap to go to the bars every day and live that life. But with the idea that I needed to find someone quickly so I could save money, I started going on dating sites, and I did allow myself to go to the bars more often just so I had more chance of finding someone. I reasoned with myself that if I went to the bars all the time, if I didn't have any luck with the dating site, I'm going to meet someone quicker than if I only went occasionally, so I might spend a bit of money now, but it's going to be worth it overall. I had no luck with any of the dating sites. I met a few girls on there, but I felt like most of them were just pretending that they were not bar girls when they actually were. So I thought it was best to actually just go to the bars and meet someone, because at least they weren't lying about what they did. And I spent a month meeting as many girls as possible and spending time with as many girls as possible to try and find the one. And it was around this time that I did find someone who I thought was perfect in every way. 32, no children. And that was one of the big things that I didn't want, was a girl with children, because I knew I would have to pay for them. I was trying to think and be sensible, but that didn't help me much later on. As was typical with most of the girls that I met, she was from Isan, but she sounded perfect. Because I knew I was looking for a girlfriend, so I didn't have to go out all the time, I had a big checklist of things I was interested in, and she ticked every single one of them. I may have overlooked her personality, because her not having children was more important, but I got on very well with her. She had a great sense of humour, and she was beautiful. She looked exactly like I imagined my girlfriend would look, and when she moved in with me, life was perfect. I wasn't expecting to give her anything. I just thought that when we went shopping together, she could put things in the shopping cart she wanted, and I would pay for it. If we went for a meal, I would pay for that, and that's just what I thought our life would be. Because she didn't have children, I wasn't expecting her to want any money from me, and she didn't ask for any money until she had already stayed with me for a month, and I felt like I'd already committed to her, and I didn't want to have to go and back and start from square one. She brought it up and said that it's normal for foreigners to give their girlfriends an allowance. And she said that although she didn't have children, she did have to send money to her parents, and she usually sent 10,000 baht a month when she worked. But she also said she needs to have some kind of independence and be able to go and buy things that she likes, and occasionally any other thing she needed. So she would need 10,000 a month for that. I know I should have run for the hills when her continuation with me was going to cost me 20,000 baht a month. But when I did the calculations, that worked out at just over 600 baht per day. If I was going to the bars every day and drinking and spending time with the girls, it was going to cost me a lot more than that, so I thought it was reasonable to accept. A typical day in the bars could be running 4 or even 5,000 baht, and when I calculated it like that, it seemed to make sense. I don't think I loved her early on. It was more having a girlfriend that met my requirements than that I could be at home and she was there. I didn't need to go out, and therefore I could save money. But after she stayed with me for 3 months, I was starting to love her, and having her there all the time made life brilliant. I was giving her 20,000 baht a month, which meant that I had to spend less on the things I wanted to buy, but I didn't see that as a big sacrifice. For example, if we went to the supermarket, before I might have spent 4 or 5,000 baht for the week buying things I liked, but now I was spending 2 or 3,000 baht for the week, and I was trying to go more local on the things I bought. But it was one of those things that I was prepared to do because I had this perfect girl living with me. I'm trying to not pay too close attention to my bank account because I am aware that the money is going down quicker than I expected. Even when I had her as my girlfriend during the early part of our relationship, I guess I was spending about 15,000 baht a month too much, and I knew I needed to bring this down. That, calculated over the course of 1 year, meant that I would spend 1 extra year of my living expenses in 3 years. So 4 years worth of money would only last 3 years if I continued to do this. But the problem was, I didn't know how to reduce my cost of living. The 20,000 I gave to her was non-negotiable. The money I spent on rent for the place we lived in was non-negotiable. There were cheaper places, but it wouldn't have made much difference. And I couldn't really spend less money on food. The only place I could cut back on were that we were going out 2 or 3 times a week. But I told her that we can only go out 1 time a week instead, and she seemed to be okay with that to start with. But not long after, she's getting bored and wanting to go out and see friends, and she's asking for extra money from me, and I'm giving it to her to keep the peace. I'm spending less and less on myself, but when I think about it, I think I'm doing the right thing, and I can't think of a reason why I'm not, because I'm staying with this perfect girl, and I'm still spending less than if I was single. The first thing I thought was, if I got married to her, I could get the marriage extension as opposed to the retirement extension, which would free up 400,000 baht. I currently had 800,000 baht in the bank for my retirement extension, but for the marriage one, you only needed half of that, so if I opened that up, that would give me maybe 8 months extra of living. I also thought if I got married, you would be less likely to continue to go out, and she might feel a bit more secure in our relationship. So that was my reasoning behind getting married. We got married without going to visit her family, and when I could, I did change to a marriage visa. I did do some things that I regret. For example, we went to Samui for a honeymoon, and I spent far too much money on a nice hotel and luxury meals every night, but I thought that was a small spend to ultimately be able to save money later on. But after we're married, if anything, she feels more emboldened to ask for more, and I'm getting concerned that my money's just going down too quickly. I mean, I do have enough money to last us years still, but I would have preferred if it was 2 or 3 years longer than the current projection. The next thing that happened was the idea to go up to her village and think about living there. I was speaking to someone in a bar one day on my allocated day out per week who spent half his time in Pattaya and half his time in Buriram in a house he built on his wife's land. He said he does it that way because when he's in Buriram, he spends a quarter of what he spends when he's in Pattaya. That meant that he could do anything he wanted in Pattaya when he was there, and he saved the rest of the time in Buriram. I could see what he was saying, but he did say that if he lived in Pattaya full-time, he wouldn't be able to go out every day because he couldn't afford it, and he didn't want to sacrifice his lifestyle in Pattaya, so having that house in Buriram was a great way for him to save money. So one day we went up to the village. We were already married, and the first thing I found out was just how much cheaper it was there. The guy who talked about living in Buriram half the year knew exactly what he was talking about, and I tried to work out what my best choice would be. My wife loved being in her village. She was like a different person when she was there. She had a support group around her, her family were there, and she felt like she was in her element. I could see us having a small house there. It didn't need to be big, just a comfortable place where we could stay for some of the year so that when we went to Pattaya, we'd be able to live properly there. I hated being in Pattaya and everything that was there I wasn't able to enjoy any time I wanted it. Knowing that everywhere I wanted to be was just outside my condo, but I needed to save money was the hardest thing. I never experienced in my life up until that point something as heart-destroying as that. I didn't want to be in a condo when life was happening outside. I start talking to my wife about spending half the time in her village and half the time in Pattaya. What would she think about that? She said that would be something that she'd love to do, but what about a house? Where were we going to live? She was right. There was no way I could live in any of the houses that we saw in the village. Huge holes in the wall, no air conditioning, and very primitive. That would be somewhere where I would draw the line. It was my intention, after finding out that for 500,000 baht or so, we could build something to live in. It might be basic, but it would be comfortable, and that's all we needed. And although that would mean I was spending money, it should pay for itself in a few years, and that should give me an extra 2 years to be able to live in Thailand while still going out all the time when we were in Pattaya. That's how I calculated it, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I miscalculated lots of things, and usually I undercalculated. So when things actually came to happen, they were far more expensive than I thought they were going to be. Thailand wasn't this cheap place after all, but we did build a house in her village, and our time there became cheap. During the months there, I was spending 30,000 baht when we were in the village. She was getting 20,000 of it, some electric, internet, and about 200 baht a day on food. I also resorted to drinking the cheap Sang Som whiskey, but what was happening was we were spending less money. The first time we went to Pattaya from the village, we found a cheap place to rent for a month, and I was expecting to spend 70,000 baht, 20,000 for her, 10,000 for the room, and the rest going out all the time. The problem was, all the money was gone after 2 weeks, and I'm starting to really wish Thailand was priced the same everywhere. The huge disparity between prices in places like Pattaya and in the village in Isan were completely ruining Thailand for me. All I wanted was it to be similarly priced, but I knew that was never going to happen. It was just a dream. I'm still not thinking about the fact that my money is going down, and when we got back to the village, we found that instead of having half the time there, we were now spending 3/4 of the time in the village, and I was getting very bored. Also, it was very difficult to get about, so after much persuasion from my wife, I bought a car, and that was 300,000 baht I wasn't expecting to spend, and I put it in her name. After being in Thailand for a few years and realizing that at this point I'm actually spent 5 years worth of living expenses, I couldn't believe just how badly things were going. I was not ready to give up yet, and I started to think about ways to make money. I knew there were ways to make money because people did make money, and I wanted to do it in the village. Maybe we could do something that could make money and we wouldn't need to go to Pattaya as often. But Pattaya is where I wanted to be, and we were only in the village to try and save money so that when we went to Pattaya, we could actually have a good time. I wasn't overly concerned yet because I still had money that should last for a few years, and I thought that it would be good to invest this money so we could start having an income instead. I asked my wife what she thought would be a good idea because that's where she came from, and she started talking about lots of different things. She said, let's open a restaurant, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to be trapped there. I wanted a business that we didn't need to be there all the time. Then she said, what about buying some land and growing crops? She wasn't talking about rice or sweet potatoes or something like that many of the people grew there. She was talking about something like chilies. If we had 1 rye of chilies, taken care of well and grown well, we might be able to make decent money with that. I took her word for it, and we actually bought 3 rye of land, which we spent 320,000 baht on. I bought all the irrigation for the land, which was another 100,000 baht on top, and we paid someone to plant all the chilies. As time goes on, the trees are looking good, we're starting to see little chilies, but then one morning we wake up and go and look at them, and they're all wilting. After closer inspection, someone had been on the land and stolen all the piping that we used for the irrigation, so there was no way for us to water them anymore, and that caused the chilies to die. That was a nightmare. We were expecting to get back a few 100,000 baht, but instead we got nothing, and we lost the irrigation. The next crop we attempted were sweet potatoes like everybody else, but the problem, on the piece of land we had, we made about 4,000 baht, so it really wasn't worth doing. And now we haven't been to Pattaya for over a year, and I'm starting to feel like I'm only here so I can be in Pattaya and enjoy it to the max all the time. I'm now in the village so that the time in Pattaya can be what it's meant to be, but now we're only in the village, and to add to that, money is going down all the time. I decided that I didn't want to try and grow anything anymore. It was too much like hard work, so I asked my wife to sell the land. That was when I first started to think that things were not going to end well, because when I asked her to sell the land, she just looked at me and laughed. "There's no way I'm selling this land," she said. "This is for our future," she said. But I think she said, or meant, it was good for her future. I think she was just waiting for my money to run out. My next attempt to make money was to buy and sell cars. I did know a little bit about cars from home, and I went and did that before. I went to a local auction and picked up 2 cars that seemed good, and I immediately listed them on 1-2 in the hopes of making only a small profit, maybe 10,000 baht on each car. But unfortunately, 3 months later, they both hadn't sold, so I had to take a loss on them just to get some money back. But that was a total loss of 50,000 baht, and it made me think, what was the point of an auction? You go to an auction to get cheap prices so that you can sell them on, but obviously auctions didn't work the same way that they did back home. Things are just going from bad to worse, and I'm desperately trying to make little bits of money just to be able to stay in the village. It was at this point, after 3 years total, so a year since I worked it out last time, that I came to the realization that I only had 1 year's money left. Do I live on this for the year and hope something works out? Or do I try one last thing with the hopes of it working? I just didn't know what to do. And then my wife came to me with an idea that she said was the best one yet. We could try to open a fish farm. Because we already had the land, if we dug some ponds and bought really tiny fish and fed them up, they should become big, and then we could sell them for a profit. With the calculations, she said 200,000 invested, we should get back 400,000 in about 6 months. That's what she said, and I jumped all over that. I thought it was a good idea, so we spent some money digging some big ponds. We bought small fish and fish food, and I just crossed my fingers that things would work. They didn't. I ended up spending more money, and now I'm starting to really panic because I don't have much money left. I probably have 200,000 baht, and that's it. I've even eaten into my visa money that has to stay in the bank so I can renew it. I did that because I thought I was going to be able to pay it back when we sold the fish, but it all failed and we lost everything. I told my wife I only had 200,000 baht left, thinking she's going to say, "Okay, you don't need to give me any money anymore until we can make something work." But she didn't say that. She still expected money every month, and I thought the best thing to do would be to try one last thing, and if it didn't work, I would have to go home, and my retirement would come to an end, and I would be returning home a failure with nothing. How it actually happened was even worse than that. 2 months later, I only had 100,000 baht left, and we hadn't thought of anything to do, and I can't for the life of me understand why I let it get that bad without doing something about it. It's as though I was hoping and praying for a miracle to happen, but the miracle never came. Any sensible person would have seen the writing on the wall and got out a long time ago, but I just couldn't accept that things were not going to work, and that's why I think it went all the way down to zero. I had no money left, absolutely nothing, no income, no savings, and nothing. I let my money go down to nothing, and I can't understand why I did that. To this day, I still think about that and try to piece together what actually happened to cause this. But I don't know, even when I just had enough money to pay for a plane ticket, I still thought something is going to happen and something can fix this. All I wanted to do was be back down in Pattaya, in the bars, having a good time. Going back home and my wife being there. That's all I wanted to do. Why was that so hard? But when I had to tell my wife that I didn't have any money left, I told her, I don't have anything. I can't give you any money anymore. She wasn't sympathetic. She wasn't trying to comfort me. She just said, go then. You no money, you leave. Exactly how she put it. I didn't even have any money to get to Bangkok. The car that I bought was in her name, and it was pretty clear that she didn't want to stay with me anymore now that I didn't have any money. And I heard of people taking their wives to court and getting half of everything. But I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything to be able to do anything with, and we had the biggest argument we ever had, and she just told me to go. When I told her I literally don't have any money left, she gave me 1,000 baht out of money that I'd given her before and said, get the bus to Bangkok and go to the embassy. They should be able to help you. Then she said she never wants to see me again, and thank you for ruining her life. How dare she say that? I tried to say that I spent money on the house and the car and the land, and that must have been at least £1,000,000 baht. Surely I should have half of it. And that's when she said, take me to court, come and get it. There's no way I could do that, because I couldn't afford to take her to court. That was the lowest point, when I had to get the bus from the village into the main town. That was 30 baht. Then the bus to Bangkok was 600 baht, and I had 370 baht left. I was down to 370 baht, and when I arrived in Bangkok, it was the evening and the embassy was already closed. With 370 baht, I had the choice of a hotel or to eat. So I decided to do neither and go and buy a bottle of whiskey from 7-Eleven so I could sit on a bench all night and wait for the embassy to open the following day. And that's true. I spent the night on the streets of Bangkok. From retirement to homeless in Bangkok. I guess you're going to use something like that for the title of the video, if you use this story. But I couldn't believe how low I'd fallen. It was the worst thing, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody else. I didn't even know if the embassy would help me. I guess they'd have to do something, but what I didn't know was just what. I just hoped they would put me on a plane back home. When the embassy opened in the morning, I was there, looking disheveled because I hadn't showered or brushed my teeth, and initially they didn't want to let me in. This was when the embassy was in Chit, before the UK sold that land for a lot of money and moved to a small office tower. I didn't have an appointment, and the guard outside didn't want to let me in, but I showed my passport and told him my situation, and they didn't really have a choice, otherwise I'd just be sat outside. I had 100 baht in my pocket, and I walked into the embassy and sat down and waited for someone to come and speak to me. About an hour later, someone came, and I told him of my predicament, that I needed to get back home. Then they told me they didn't pay for people's plane tickets home, but they could contact family for me, who could hopefully send some money across. When I told him I didn't have any friends or family that you could contact, I'm here on my own and I don't have anybody, they said they could lend the money, but I would need to pay it back. I couldn't believe that. I did think the embassy would just give me the money to fly back because I had paid tax all my life, but that didn't count for anything. But after they exhausted all the options, understanding that I really didn't have any family that could send me money, they lent me the money for a flight. When I said that I didn't have anywhere to stay, they said they weren't able to help. They said try and find a friend who could assist. But a plane ticket was booked for the following day, which meant I had just enough money to be able to drink water and somehow get myself to the airport. I went straight to the airport and spent the night there, and I flew home broken. What to do when I was there? That was the big difficulty, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anything left. I had nothing. But it was my plan to somehow do something. I had to survive. It took me over 5 years to get back on my feet, and I'm living somewhere now that wouldn't be your dream place, but at least I have a roof over my head, and at least I have money coming in that I can live on. I'll never be able to go to Thailand again. I wouldn't trust myself because things went so badly wrong. I don't think I'll ever leave home again. I've come to the conclusion that I must have something wrong with me for being so stupid, but I do still remember how good a time I had in Pattaya. If I could be anywhere right now, it would be Pattaya, in one of the bars with a beer, speaking to a girl, going out for a nice meal looking at the beach, then walking back to the condo where I lived, before swimming and watching a film, before repeating the whole process every single day until the end of my life. I suppose I am still a dreamer. That's how I opened up this story, by being a dreamer, and I still dream. I dream about what my life should have been like if things didn't go so badly wrong. I still occasionally have nightmares about some of the stupid things I did. I can't believe I let my resources go to nothing before I saw the writing on the wall. I didn't see myself as being stupid, but I was desperate and I clung on to the last second because I knew if I left, I would never be able to go back. So that's my story, and don't be like me. You need emergency money, and if you don't have any money on top of that, that means it's time to go home. I would say your emergency money should be enough to get you established back at home for a whole 6 months before needing to find more money. There's going to be a different amount of money for everybody, so you need to work out what that is for you. I did it wrong, and I regret everything, because I'm not where I want to be, and I never will be.
I moved to Thailand in January 2009, and I did so with enough money to live for the rest of my life. I started out living in Bangkok, a city where I had actually lived 10 years prior to 2009 for a year when I was posted there for a company I was working for, and I loved the city ever since. I'd been living in Bangkok for approximately 6 months on a retirement visa. I was 52 years old, happy, and looking forward to what the rest of my retirement would bring. I was living on Sukhumvit Soi 11, and every day was just like I was on holiday, but that's how it was meant to be. I'd worked hard, and now it was my time to play hard. So when I met a girl in a bar on Soy Cowboy, and things started getting serious, I didn't think too much about it because I had the money to spare, and I will admit, I had an addiction to the bars. I just wanted to move ahead with how things were going, because we seemed to be perfect together. She was 23 years old from a little village in Isan, and it felt so great to get into a relationship with her because she was the first girl that I met that I actually felt a really deep connection to. I didn't start out by wanting to have a wife, but that is how things turned out. And to anyone who says I shouldn't have got into a relationship with a bar girl, I get what you're saying, but for me, she fit into my lifestyle so well. Drinking, partying, and generally having a good time all the time. Life was good. She was amazing at having a great time, and she reminded me of myself when I was her age, and before long, we were indeed married, living together in a great apartment in central Bangkok. We spent most of our time just living life to the fullest every single day. We would go to the beach regularly, switching it up between Phuket, Samui, and a few of the other islands. We would also leave Thailand occasionally, going to neighbouring countries, and for the first year of us living together and being married, I was incredibly happy with the decision I made to both retire to Thailand and get married to her. My retirement had gotten off to a fabulous start. I wasn't one of those guys who moved to Thailand with a pittance. I had more than enough money invested, both in a few properties in my own country, other dividend-paying stocks, a few index funds, and I guess I was probably bringing in an income of around $6,000 a month. In 2009, 2010, after we'd been together for a year, this was a fantastic amount of money to be able to live on in Thailand, and I also had liquid cash available, probably to the tune of around $600,000. I didn't have any plans for that. I was open to anything that came my way. But after 30 years of incredibly hard work, very late nights, and sometimes working 7 days straight for months on end, I felt like I deserved to enjoy myself. While I had a few friends at this time who lived on a lot less money than I did and had a great time, it was my intention to spend all of my monthly income to make sure that I was enjoying myself. I had it coming in, it had to go out one way or the other. That was just my mentality. And we were coming up to the end of 2010, and I decided to take my wife away on a year-end break, a few weeks before the end of the year, just to try to avoid the main crowds. We decided that we would go to Krabi. It was part of the country I'd never been to before, and it was then our intention to drive down from Bangkok. At this point, I bought a car. I bought a Mercedes C-Class, only the 2-litre because although I could have afforded to buy one with a bigger engine, it would have been a lot more expensive because the import taxes on cars in Thailand were so insane. I just didn't think it was worth spending 3 times what the car was worth just to have it. But I liked nice things, and that was the car we were going to drive down to Krabi in. My wife was still friendly with some of the girls that worked in the bar where she used to work, and I didn't have any problem with that. I think when you have enough money to not care about anything, it really does make a difference. So, she asked me if one of her friends could go with us. I would have to pay for everything, and if that was acceptable, she would be eternally grateful. And I think I should point out that my wife knows I had a good income, but she didn't know I had liquid cash or what my investments were or anything like that. As far as she was concerned, I had 100,000 baht a month to live on, and for her that was a lot of money. The fact that I was on probably double that, I didn't really feel like I needed to tell her. The reason that this girl was going to be going with us was because she had recently broken up with her boyfriend. She was feeling a bit upset, and my wife wanted to make sure that she was okay, and she said that we could all have a good time together. I wasn't about to say no to something like that, so we set off to Krabi. We actually spent a night in Hua Hin, which was fun, and another night in Surat Thani. Both of those places I'd been to before, and that was one of the things I loved most about Thailand. Being able to go to all these amazing places everywhere, especially when you have your own transport, and see the different side of the country and what it has to offer. But anyway, we made it down to Krabi, and it was initially my plan to stay for a week. We checked into this incredible resort just outside Ao Nang, probably 5,000 baht a night, and back then that was a lot. I'd guessed today something similar would be closer to 10,000, but it was so incredible, and I was just feeling it so much that I asked how would my wife feel if we could extend our stay there to a month, maybe 6 weeks. She was more than happy, and her friend was as well. I want you to picture my wife. Picture a girl who was incredibly stunning. 24 years old at the time, really long hair that she had bleached, and there was about 4 inches of her natural hair colour coming through, exactly how I liked it. Some people might disagree with me, but she was covered in tattoos, and I love that sort of thing. If you don't, that's your taste, but I do. And she had a lip ring. She was also a little bit more sophisticated than some of the other girls that I'd met. Her English was of a higher level than many girls I met, and she had a side to her that I could tell was coming out. As she was getting a bit older, eventually it seemed that she would have wanted to settle down and not continue partying all the time, but we were both very happy to be doing this in the time. I wasn't ready to settle down, and because of that, I was just so happy to have my ideal wife and life. Her friend was a bit more reserved, 22, and not one tattoo or piercing, but she was still beautiful. What I'm trying to say is that I felt very fortunate that my wife was open to all kinds of things, and the first few weeks we spent at that resort were so good, at least for me, that I wouldn't even want to describe everything that went on because I don't think anybody would believe me. While we wanted to avoid the New Year crowds, because we extended our stay there, we would be there for New Year, and that was good for me, because the place was just so epic. Our days at the resort would involve waking late, having an amazing breakfast, partying from 1 PM and keeping it going all the way until the end of the day, both drinking in our room, which had its own private pool attached, and also going out to the bars and restaurants around Ao Nang. I guess we'd been there for a month, and I didn't want to return to Bangkok. As I said, we kept extending. But one thing that was constant was my wife's friend was continuously being called by her old boyfriend, a younger guy from Germany. He was calling her all the time. He missed her, he wanted to see her, and eventually she caved in and told him to come down to Krabi to see if they could sort things out together. He was 29, and he did remind me of myself when I was that age, apart from I was hard-working, making a lot of money and partying when I could. He was just partying when he could, worry about the money later kind of thing. But because he was in Thailand, he was still in a lot better financial position than my wife's friend was. So I suppose that's why she caved in and told him to come down and see us. When he arrived, he took a small room in a hotel not too far away from the resort, and I think he probably understood what was going on between me and my wife and his girlfriend at the time when he wasn't with her. But I wasn't one of those guys to try and rub salt in the wound or anything. I was just actually ready for a break because it had been a crazy time. We went on to spend another month there. He was back together with his girlfriend now, and we had quite a number of really drunken nights, and before long it was time to return to Bangkok. I drove us all back there, and it was great. We had a good time. At this point, I was spending about 40,000 baht a month for our condo in Bangkok, which again at the time was quite a lot for rent, but I could more than afford it. But I was thinking about actually buying my own place because I had the available cash. I started looking around at options, and I did buy a condo a few hundred meters from the Asok BTS station. It was a large one-bedroom unit, plus there was a tiny room that I could use for an office-type space, but it wasn't really big enough to be a bedroom. That cost me the equivalent of $130,000, and I spent about $10,000 getting it to my liking. Life was going better than I thought life could go. I guess we'd been back from Krabi for 4 months at this point because, it was May, and I was wanting to go away somewhere else. My wife invited her friend and her boyfriend, who were still together, and this time we went to Phuket. We spent a month there. We shared a really nice resort, a 2-bedroom villa-style place, private pool, the works. And again, we had another incredible time and returned to Bangkok. And I was thinking that I was the luckiest man in the world for being able to live such an incredible life in retirement. Back in Bangkok, in my own condo, we were going to Soy Cowboy quite often, as well as the other places that were within walking distance. But that was always my favourite place to go. But about 6 weeks later, my wife started throwing up in the morning. She started feeling really not well and didn't really tell me much more, so we went to the hospital. She was pregnant. That wasn't exactly what I had been planning. I'd never had kids and I didn't want kids because, I think it's quite obvious I wanted to enjoy myself. And if I had kids, I would want them to enjoy themselves a lot more than I would want to enjoy myself. So basically, I felt like my whole life was over. But I was happy at the same time because there was no use being unhappy about it because it couldn't be changed. The birth control pills she was taking obviously didn't do their job. The first thing I'm thinking, though, is I've just bought this condo and it's only 1 bedroom. Where is our child going to sleep? While I felt like I knew Thailand very well at this point, I was not aware of how common it was for people's kids to stay in their parents' room, and even in the parents' bed until they're up to 5, 6 or even 7 years old. I've heard of even longer than that. And where I was from, this was completely opposite. I was in my own crib from the day I was born, and probably 3 months after that I was in my own room. That was just how it was done in my family, and I assumed it would be something similar to that in Thailand. But I was wrong. It was nothing like. But anyway, now my wife is pregnant. She couldn't go out partying and drinking anymore, and while I still went out occasionally, it just wasn't the same without her. I wasn't somebody who would ever cheat on his spouse, unless she was the one who came up with the idea and that was all well and good. But I would never do something like that because I thought that was the lowest of the low. So going out, it just wasn't the same anymore without her. We went away for a month when she was about 4 months pregnant, but again, it just wasn't the same, because everything that we did before we couldn't do anymore. And in a way, it might have been better to slow down because I was drinking and smoking heavily every single day up until then, and I probably would have gone to an early grave. At the time, though, even though I knew that, I didn't care. I thought I would rather enjoy myself now for another 10 years, rather than not enjoy myself for another 10 years and more on top. So that month away was nothing like the times we had before, and we returned to Bangkok with no plans to go anywhere else again until my wife gave birth to our son. We'd already found out we were going to have a son. When I got married, I did everything that most foreign guys do when they need to go to Isan. I went up and did everything that was expected of me. I quite liked the place in terms of serenity, but I never had any idea to ever live there. But after my wife became pregnant, the later stages of pregnancy, I would say after 5 months, she was starting to struggle in terms of always feeling sick. She wasn't able to do much anymore, and she kept saying how much she wanted to go back to where she was from so that her family could help her. I noticed a considerable change in my wife. But you would expect that. I didn't hold anything against her, it was just what it was. And after she kept going on about it for month after month, I thought it only made sense that I take her up to her family so that she could be taken care of and make sure everything goes well with the pregnancy. We decided to go and do some shopping for all the things we would need for the baby because her village was in a small town which probably didn't have the same kind of things. So we spent the day going around. I bought a car seat, absolutely everything that we could probably think of that we would need. And about $10,000 later, the car was full, and the following morning we set off to the village. It was the plan that I would spend a few days there and return to Bangkok, and she would stay there until after giving birth, maybe a few months, and then return to Bangkok and we would look for a bigger place. We arrived and I'd never actually stayed there before. When we got married, we stayed in a hotel close by, but because she wanted to be with her family, we had to stay there, and she had her old room that she had when she was growing up, but it wasn't much of anything good. This was a 100% wood house, and there were holes in the walls and you would need mosquito nets to sleep. There was no air conditioning or anything really, and after one night I'd had more than enough. I wasn't able to take it, so I went to stay in the hotel that we stayed at when we got married, and she stayed with her family. The next day I took her to order an air conditioning unit for her room, and also we got someone to put in a bit of insulation so that it would work effectively. It didn't cost a lot, maybe a couple of $1,000s for everything, so that she was going to be comfortable. I don't know how much more comfortable there she was than in our nice condo in Bangkok, but she seemed to be. But I suppose that's how she grew up. That was what she was used to, and I saw a different side to my wife than I'd ever seen before. I was used to seeing her as she was. She liked to wear makeup, she liked to wear earrings and her piercings, but now she removed all the piercings, she wasn't wearing makeup, and she doesn't do her hair anymore. I didn't have any problems with that, but it was clear that this pregnancy was changing her, and it was likely going to change her even more. One thing I loved about Thailand was how quickly they managed to do things. 3 days later, someone had already been and basically added lots of insulation to the room, the air conditioning was installed, and it was a lot more comfortable for her. The bathroom situation at places like that, if you're not aware, was something that I couldn't handle. And I'm not sure why she wanted to be there, because at our condo in Bangkok, we had a proper bathroom. But here she had to walk about 30 metres away from the house to this little hut. There was a squat toilet and a bucket of water, and that was the bathroom. It was clear that she needed what she was used to, and having her family around was good for her. I left after about a week to Bangkok, but it just wasn't the same without her. I was going out with friends occasionally, but I wasn't having as much fun because she wasn't there. And as I said, I'm definitely not the sort of person who would ever cheat on his wife. We had plans to go away again, but this was off the cards because of the pregnancy. And after about 2 weeks of me being in Bangkok, I thought I would just go up and stay in that hotel close to the village until she gave birth. The next few months passed, we were paying for the best private hospital in her hometown, and before long she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. And while the pregnancy changed her, actually having our son changed her even more, as you'd expect, and she seemed to be very proud as a parent. It was always the intention to go back to Bangkok after 3 months, and her family were very good, helping her to look after our son in the first few months, and when it was finally time to return to Bangkok, I had been myself a few times just to get away for a bit, but I was relieved. I was relieved to be going back. In fact, I would say I was delighted that we were going to be going back to Bangkok, and I couldn't wait for us to get back to our life there. I'd already learned what the situation was in terms of sleeping, and our son would likely be in our room for a number of years, so we didn't need to worry about getting a bigger place yet. And when we got back to Bangkok, we got into a very different pattern than we had before. No partying, no drinking. I was having a few beers every day and the odd cigarette now and then, but this was either when we were out for a meal or back at the condo. My life was completely different from what I expected it to be in terms of our retirement, where I expected to continuously party until I couldn't do it anymore. But we were settling down, and I think everything was going as well as it could have been, given the fact that I was in my mid-50s and I had a newborn son. Not exactly what I had planned, but I was making the best of it. It quickly became clear to me, though, that my wife was struggling. She was struggling because it was very new to her. It was new to me. I was doing my best, but she was the one doing the motherly things because she was the mother, and she was struggling. When I looked at her and compared her to the girl that I met, the difference was immense, and I'm struggling as well. Not necessarily in the same way as her, but I'm struggling because I don't have anything to do anymore. I don't have anything to look forward to anymore. I mean, I'm having a fantastic time with my son, don't get me wrong, but when he's sleeping or when he's not really doing anything, I'm not able to do what I used to. We're not going out to eat as much, we're eating at home a lot more, and I'm just sat there twiddling my thumbs thinking, what am I going to do? I'd say we'd been back in Bangkok for approximately 3 months, and my wife had a bit of a breakdown. I had to take her to the hospital, and it was really clear that she was struggling too much to cope. I was doing my best to help, But she asked me how I would feel if we went to go live up in the village where she had her family around her for support. Initially, I thought she meant maybe for 6 months, but she said she wanted the support around her until our son attended school. We were probably talking 4 years. And initially I pushed back, saying, let's try to get through this. But another month later, it was just awful, really. The amount she's having difficulties, I'm taking on lots of roles that someone in his 50s shouldn't have to be doing, and she's really having a hard time with things. So I caved in and said that I would go and live up in the village with her, and we could build our own place there. When I agreed to do that, I actually felt quite excited, because it was a project, and it was something to do. I could keep track of the progress of the house, and I could do something so different. I was bored to death in Bangkok, living such a different life than the retirement I'd envisaged, and it did feel like it could be a good idea to do something like that. I had ample money, so I wouldn't miss $100,000 to buy some land and build a nice house, and when her family knew that we were going to go and live up there, they were happy as well. Family in Thailand is very important, and the fact that they were going to be able to see their grandson, they were delighted. I got on very well with her family. None of them looked anything like her in terms of tattoos and things, but I got on well with all of them. They were really nice people. We packed up the condo, the small bits that we could take with us. Most of the big things we just left, and we left it empty so that we had somewhere to return to when we came back to Bangkok, which I planned to do from time to time. We arrived in the village, and we both were now staying in that hotel, and after about 2 weeks of being there, construction had already started on a 2-story, 3-bedroom house on some land that I'd actually bought to my wife for a wedding present. I think it was $5,000 or something, so it wasn't a lot. I felt a renewed sense of purpose when I was watching the house get built. I wanted to make sure everything was done properly, and while I wasn't a builder, I had supervised the renovation of 2 properties that I owned in my own country. She's feeling a lot more relieved to have help from her family, and I'm actually a lot happier than I was in Bangkok, and that might sound like it should be the wrong way around. I was bored in Bangkok because I couldn't go out and do things like I wanted to do because I felt dreadful leaving my wife by herself with our son. But in the village, I wasn't bored because I was doing different things that I never thought I would have ever be doing. And yes, when I'm going around the building site, I do have a beer in hand, but I was retired and I wanted to enjoy myself just a little. I wasn't enjoying myself, but I was starting to think that maybe now that we had our son, I should get back to work. I should start a new business, we should start doing something, even if it wasn't for making money, just something to keep me occupied, because the thought of my son turning 10 years old, for example, and I'm there, a raging alcoholic, that didn't sit right with me. Also, I had to change my plan. Whereas before, I wasn't too concerned about having an amazing time now, if that meant having a less time later. Now I was concerned that because I wanted to be around for as long as possible for our son. Once the house was ready, I felt like I didn't have anything to do anymore. But we went to pick out all the furniture together, made everything really nice, and I even spent about $25,000 on a swimming pool. And right next to that, I made an outside bar area where we could have barbecues. But if I'm being perfectly honest, thinking about it was actually a lot more fun than actually doing it. The thought of being able to sit by my own pool with a cocktail and then going and lighting up the barbecue and cooking a steak while swimming in the pool, the thought of that was considerably better than the first time I did it, because once I'd done it once, it wasn't the same. I think everyone has the same kind of attitude when it comes to things like that. Thinking about things can often be a lot better than actually doing them, and that was most definitely the case here. I then started thinking about doing some kind of business, not necessarily to make a lot of money or anything, just to have something to do, because I needed something to do to be occupied. I thought long and hard about all the potential businesses that I could do, and one thing that I kept thinking about was having some kind of wholesale place in town. This was a small town in Isan, to the north of Buriram. That's as much information as I would like to give. But my thought was, let's buy a shop house in the centre of the town and let's do a wholesale deliveries from there. My idea was to buy things in bulk. I'm talking about non-perishable goods, and then have delivery drivers take them around to all the small shops around the area, so they didn't need to go into town to buy things themselves, and just price them less than they could buy them for at the moment. You know, things like drinks and condiments, things that people in that part of Thailand really liked. And if I could source things directly from the factory, I should be able to get them at a good price, even if it meant having to buy in huge amounts. I had the money behind me, and this wouldn't affect my investments, and I started warming to the idea. Something to keep me occupied, something for my son to be proud of, and also something for my wife to get involved with when our son was old enough to attend school. I spent at least 3 months driving around all the villages in our town and also villages around other towns, and there were so many mom and pop shops everywhere. If I could have things delivered to them that they could sell, and I could give them really good terms so they didn't need to pay up front for things and they could stock more and make more, this could actually be quite a good idea. I was well aware that there were risks with some people not paying, but I thought that would only be a marginal problem and would be outweighed by all the benefits that would come our way. After another 3 months of looking around, I decided that I would go ahead with this. I thought it was a good idea, and even if it just broke even if I lost a tiny bit of money, I'm occupied, my mind's active, and that's what it was all about. I was spending so much less money than I was before in Bangkok. We weren't going out and partying all the time, we weren't going away to expensive resorts all the time, and I was struggling to spend my investment income even if I tried. So this sounded like a great project for me to get stuck into. It was my plan to do this through a proper Thai limited company, but at the time you needed 3 shareholders. I could be one, I could only own 49% of the business, but my wife could own basically the rest of it and a token amount could belong to one of her family members. It didn't really matter. I could also set it up that I would have preference shares, which meant that I would have more votes for each of my shares than anybody else would, but that wasn't really necessary because I wasn't risking a lot of money. I did spend 3 million baht, around $100,000 give or take at the time, on a shop house in town that we could do it from, and that went into my wife's name because it was just the easiest thing to do. It was also my intention to employ a very well-educated, perfect English-speaking type of person to help with the business, and I was prepared to pay well for that. While you can employ people in Thailand for not very much money, if you want someone who is good and who is perhaps from the sort of family who does that sort of thing, you should be prepared to pay a lot more. I was prepared to pay a high salary, 40,000 baht plus huge commissions based on performance, and I actually managed to recruit someone from down in Bangkok, and I gave him 2% of the business as well. He was amazing. He knew exactly what this business was meant to be, exactly what it meant, and exactly how well we could succeed if things went well. I also bought 4 pickup trucks and hired 4 more members of staff to act as delivery drivers and also to do other odd jobs that they would be doing. All in, the monthly outgoings were going to be around 200,000 baht, and that was for everything. And while the profit margins weren't going to be high, we were talking about doing this in bulk. I got a work permit, changed from a retirement visa to a marriage visa which I could work on, and after coming up with the idea, it was approximately 8 months later when we opened the business, and the guy that I got to help me started working better than I ever thought he would. We were able to buy lots of things directly from the manufacturer, and we were quickly getting lots of shops to sign up with us to sell things, and about a year later it was about the point when I started to break even. It was exciting. As I've already said, it wasn't about the money, it was about having something to do, trying to keep myself healthy both physically and mentally, and this business was going very well. My wife was very happy that we were there and she was able to get so much support from her family, and I was happy that we made the decision. It was an awful lot of work to get that business set up. I'm not trying to say it was easy. I went back to my old ways of extremely long days, lots of ideas, dealing with the staff that we had. But at this point I had put my guy's salary up to 60,000, and probably with commissions he was making 100,000, which was a lot more than he probably could have made elsewhere. I treated him well and he appreciated it, and he even got himself a mortgage on a house in town and bought it. His whole family were living there, and his 2 kids were going to a private school. Things were going great. Another year went by and we were happy. We were a happy family. The business was doing well, and I'm even starting to actually take a salary out of it. I mean, I had to take a salary out of it and pay tax in order to be able to get the work permit, but that was only a marginal thing. But the fact that I had 5 Thai people working for me, they were all being paid and able to support their families, and the fact that our son was coming along very well, it wasn't exactly the retirement I was planning for even remotely, because I wasn't really retired anymore. But it was the sort of life I was happy to be living. This was about 2 years after forming the company, 2 years with my work permit, 2 years with my marriage extension. I was actually informed by the company that I used down in Bangkok to help me do everything that I should consider applying for permanent residence in Thailand, which I could get with another 1-year work permit and visa. If I had permanent residence, that would mean that I would not need to renew my visa ever again, and there were some other benefits that would go along with it as well, such as I would be able to get a mortgage to buy a condo in Thailand, which I couldn't do without it. I mean, I could buy one, but I couldn't do it on a mortgage. I could also be entered into the Blue House registration book in Thailand, which I couldn't do without it. And I would also be closer to being able to apply for citizenship if I ever wanted to do that. Now I know, I was also informed that I could have gone straight for citizenship, but in order to get citizenship, you had to score a certain amount of points. I believe it was 50 out of 100 minimum before you could apply. Or was that permanent residence? I don't really remember. My memory is not serving me very well anymore, but the reason I didn't go for citizenship was because I didn't meet all the requirements. I didn't have a degree, so I wouldn't get any points for that. I couldn't speak Thai very well apart from a few basic conversations, so permanent residence felt like it was going to be the easiest way for me to stay permanently in Thailand without renewing my visa. I should also say that 99% of foreigners never go for this. That's what I was informed, and only 100 people per nationality get it per year. It's not necessarily easy to get, and it's a long drawn-out process, and I hadn't really heard about it until the agent informed me, and it would be quite expensive to use their services, but I could afford it. So I thought, when the time was right, I would apply, and if I got it, great. If I didn't, well, never mind. We hadn't been on holiday for a very long time. My son was doing great, my wife was feeling good that we were close to her family for support, but we decided that it was about time we spent a few weeks away just completely relaxing to reset. We left the business in charge of my guy, no problems there by the way, and we went this time to Koh Samui. Another amazing resort, and we even took her cousin with us, and she was able to act as a nanny so that we could go out in the evenings together like old times and have a few wild nights. It really felt like it was the break that we both needed. We'd both been working very hard, having a good time doing it. I'm not complaining. I was having a fantastic time. My wife was just getting used to being a mother, which I still think she was struggling to come to terms with. One night, though, it really stood out as being great. We were staying not too far away from Chaweng Beach, and we had an amazing seafood meal right on the beach, beers, cocktails, the works, and we just sat there talking for hours about things, about how fantastic life was. We then went for a long walk along the beach, listening to the waves, and my wife was still the same beautiful person she always was. She'd stopped wearing her piercings, but I didn't care, and it made me actually think for a while because this was what life was before we had our son. It made me realise that I actually missed being able to do this, because this is what we were doing all the time and I loved doing it so much, and now life was so different. But we did decide that moving forwards, we should try to get away at least once every 6 months, even if it was only for 2 weeks at a time, just to reset and also give our son some great experiences. That was a wonderful family holiday, but I didn't know that it would have been our last. We returned up to the village, we got into the same patterns as we had before we went on holiday, and the months were passing by. Business was doing okay. It wasn't making fortunes, but it was paying for itself and giving me a bit of money on top for my troubles, and our son was approaching the age where he was about to start nursery, or whatever it is they call it in Thailand, before school. I was quietly missing my old retired life, because if I thought about how old I was at the time, and then added another 15 years to that, that would have been when my son was 18, and even then there was university after that and other things that would go along with it. So I never really had any dreams of an actual retirement again because I thought I would probably be too old by that time, that he was doing his own things. But again, things would never get there, unfortunately. The following year passed without incident, and we're approaching the time when I can actually apply for this permanent residence thing, which I was extremely excited about, given that I didn't even know it existed until I was informed of it. My full 3 years of my marriage visa and work permit, as well as my tax payments and everything, had come up in January of that year. And because the way it works, you had to apply at a certain time of the year for residence, and that was usually around December. I am starting to get a bit tired in terms of the business though. It's taking up a lot of time and effort, and while it's making bits of money, it's not like it was needed. But I'm continuing, and I'm actually starting to think perhaps I will scale it down a bit after I put in the residence application. It was around this time that I actually had to go back to my own country for a funeral. One of my closest friends had sadly passed away, so I took 2 weeks to go there and pay my respects. And that also made me think that it was about time I did scale back the business, because I was working just like I used to do before. I was working all the time. The problem was, though, what would I do without the business? I'd be bored again, and I started talking to my wife about the possibility of maybe moving back to Bangkok, getting a bigger place there, and she was warming to the idea because our son was getting older, he was getting easier to handle, and if needs be, we could take her cousin with us, who was a few years younger than she was, and she would be able to act as a nanny, and we'd have some time to do things we wanted and someone there to help. Nothing was decided yet, nothing was set in stone. These were just things that we were talking about and thinking about. It wasn't close to that point yet, and we probably still had a few years to go before that would be the case, because after applying for residence, could be a few years before hopefully being approved for it. One thing though that I did around March of that year was go down to Bangkok, speak to my agent who had done a fantastic job with absolutely everything I'd used them for, and they gave me a long list of documentation that I needed to get together for residence. They were going to charge me around 500,000 baht to help me with the application, which sounded like a lot of money, seeing as when they helped me with the visa it was only a small fraction of that. But it did seem like it was an awful lot of work, and the amount of paperwork we would need would be substantial. It always made sense to me to use the help of a professional to get the job done properly, instead of doing it wrong once and then using someone to help you afterwards, when you should have just used someone to start with. The business was still going well though, although I had taken a step back and my guy was doing a lot more work and he was making more money because of it. And I was starting to think that perhaps I should just hand over the business to him because I didn't need it. It was just something for me to do. And he was doing a great job, and it was because of this that I was able to apply for permanent residence in the first place. But I hadn't got that far yet. Then began the task of preparing all the documentation for permanent residence. Some of the basic ones were basic. Copies of our marriage certificate, copies of my wife's house registration, copies of our son's birth certificate. Everything that we could possibly need in terms of copies of documents was quite easy to do. Then I needed a criminal record check from my own country, which was a bit more tedious, and I started out by contacting the embassy, asking them how to get it, and there was a process you had to go, but it took about a month to get that. That was a waiting game. Of course, I needed all my tax returns as well. I was paying myself a good salary, and that in turn meant I was paying tax every month. So I had all that, my work permit, I had that for over 3 years, and that needed multiple copies of each page. My passport, of course, needed multiple copies of each page as well. The marriage visa and everything needed copying. And I think we got all that ready by May of that year. Still around 5 to 6 months to go before the application window was open, so we had plenty of time to get everything else that we would need. I went back down to Bangkok with everything we had, and they began the task of putting everything into a neat piles, because we had lots of copies of everything, and they would need multiple sets of everything for some reason. Thailand and the bureaucracy was just one of those things you put up with, and you just did it without complaining or thinking anything of it, because if you started to get upset about it, that was when you would question whether you actually wanted to continue or not. But I was just taking it as it came. If I got it, good. If I didn't, never mind. Next, I had to do a health check at a Thai government hospital. That didn't actually cause many issues. I was in and out in a few hours, and that was one more document out of the way. And while my Thai language was getting a bit better, it wasn't great, but I was told that as long as I could hold basic conversations, it should be okay. It wasn't as stringent as many people made it out to be, although I was just going to take it as it came and play it all by ear. I was going into it thinking I wasn't going to get it, so if I got it, it would be good. I think that's the best way to do anything in Thailand. If you're doing something, think that it's not going to work. Expect it to not work. And if it doesn't work, never mind. If it does, very good. That always worked very well for me in Thailand, and I would recommend anybody else to do the same thing if you want to do something in the country. We were approaching August, and I was with my agent again, and they were looking through all the paperwork and everything seemed to be in order. There were still a few things outstanding, and one thing that was outstanding was that I needed to do a DNA test at a Thai hospital to prove that my son was mine. It was just one of the requirements, and I thought that was a very strange thing to ask for, but it had to be done, so we went to get it done. We went to this hospital together, me and my son and my wife also went along, and we were told that the results would be available in approximately 1 or 2 weeks' time. That didn't seem like it was going to be too bad, given that we had ample time to get everything ready before we needed to put the application in, so we returned back to the village and just continued as normal. About 10 days later, I got a call saying that there had been some kind of error and we needed to go back and do the whole thing again. No big deal because this was Thailand and things like that can happen. So we went all the way back to Bangkok to this government hospital and repeated the process again. There was no hint that there was anything wrong here, and then from there we went back to the village again, and I received a call saying that I needed to be there. Very well, so I drove back to Bangkok, and the following day I went into the hospital and the doctor was sat there, and he had this sickening look on his face. The DNA test shows that your son is not your son. In that moment, I had no idea what to say. I actually shouted at him, "How dare you say that? Of course he's my son. I've been bringing him up, he's my son and I had him with my wife." But he showed me the results. "No, he's not. That's why we did it twice. He's not your son." That was probably the day that my world ended. The doctor said he would recommend that I get in touch with other companies that could actually check and do that as well to make sure that we're 100% certain, because he was only 99.9% certain. But that's how he put it to me. But he wasn't being smart about it, he was just being as delicate as he could. And I can remember walking out of the hospital thinking about how could this be the case. I went to a hotel and my wife was calling me and I didn't want to answer. And I remembered what he said, so I looked online for other ways of doing these tests, and I just thought, is there any point? I mean, it's already certain. But I told my wife that we still had to wait for the results. I didn't want to get angry yet, just in case this 0.1% chance was actually real. I told her that she needed to come down to Bangkok because I found somewhere else to do this, and told her that we were having problems at the hospital or whatever. I made up something because I wasn't about to throw away my whole life unless I was 100% certain. So she arrived with our son and we went there, and I was obviously looking very upset and shocked about the whole thing, and I just had to tell my wife that I was really unwell with a fever. I can't remember what I said exactly, but I told her she needed to go back up to the village for whatever reason. Again, I can't remember, and I waited in Bangkok for the results. While I was already pretty sure what was going to come back, and bear in mind my wife didn't appear to be concerned at all, I was a nervous wreck. I was at the bars every day. I was getting absolutely annihilated, even more so than I did before, because I just couldn't come to terms with the fact that this could be real. After everything I'd done, not necessarily just in terms of the money I spent, adding everything up, there was $100,000 on the house. Everything that we put in the house and the swimming pool was another $40,000. The shop house in town, that was $110,000. When I got married to my wife, $30,000. Probably another $80,000 spent on her as well. Then all this money, everything I'd given to my wife over the years, and other things, $50,000, $30,000 for her family, the car which I bought for my wife, $100,000, and at least another $150,000 on top of that. I can't even remember what it was about, but all that money that I'd invested into this relationship, and if this was actually true, it would have all been for nothing. That week passed by and my wife's calling me. I'm not answering the phone anymore. I've just told her I'm not well and I'll speak to her when I feel better. When I went to get the results, it was exactly as expected. He wasn't my son. It now had been 3 tests and it was undeniable. He wasn't my son. And I'm thinking, whose son could he be? Then I remembered, back to the time we went to Krabi with my wife's friend and her boyfriend, and the time after when we went to Phuket. Everything seemed to add up to the fact. Everything. More likely than not, it was his. Funnily enough, he was still with his girlfriend. They were actually married now, and they had just had their own child, and they were living in Thailand, in Bangkok. And while I wasn't friends with him, I had probably spoken to him once over the last year. So I called him up, told him I was in Bangkok, and asked if he fancied meeting for a beer. He said he would, so we arranged to meet at the Australian place on Soy 11, which I believe isn't there anymore, although that's only a minor detail given the fact that I'm about to confront the guy who could have had a child with my wife that I'd been bringing up as my own and spending a bloody fortune on. Luckily, he arranged to meet me that evening, so I didn't have to go through another sleepless, drunken night, and I made my way there for 7 p.m, and he was sat at the table, a smile on his face, and he stood up. We shook hands and I sat down, and I think he could tell that there was something wrong. Before he had a chance to say anything, I looked at him and said, "I need to ask you a question, and I need you to tell me the truth straight away, because something has happened to me that nothing could be worse than. So if you try to do anything other than tell me the truth, I don't care what happens to me. When we went away with you that time, did you do anything with my wife, yes or no?" He had a really shocked look on his face, like he was concerned. He said, "What do you mean? What do you mean, did I do anything with your wife? Did you do anything with my wife, yes or no?" And I think he knew I was extremely serious, and he just said he did. 5 times, he said. And that was all I needed to know. "Well then," I said, "it appears that I've been raising your son for the past number of years, and I've also invested heavily into many things together with my wife. And it appears that I shouldn't have been doing that." This huge look of fear on his face was like a look I'd never seen before, and before he had a chance to say anything, I stood up and walked out. I was pretty sure that it was him, because all the timing was right, unless she'd done something with someone else as well, although I don't know how. But that would have been a lot more difficult anyway. Everything added up, and I'd been raising this guy's son, and now I'm thinking, what am I going to do with my life? It's a very difficult situation to find yourself in. I suppose many guys have spoken about it to other guys in the past. What would you do if you found this out? Some of them would say, well, I would still support the child because we're still like father and son, and I've been bringing him up anyway and it wasn't his fault. Others would say, I would immediately cease any contact out of embarrassment, and it's not my fault that my wife was such a disgusting human being. She must have had some inkling that something was wrong. She must have thought that doing multiple DNA tests was a problem. She must have been holding out some fear deep down that something was wrong, but she acted like nothing was wrong. Now I've got the difficult decision to make about what I should do. If I add up everything at this point, I actually checked properly to make sure I understood how much money I'd spent on everything I did together with her. It added up to around $700,000. That wasn't including my own condo, but $700,000 on everything, all of it a lie. And while I hesitate to use the word lucky, in that I had all my investments remaining and still had a very good income coming in, at this point it had risen because my investments had done well and I was on about $9,000 a month. But it wasn't about that. It was about something far worse than that. I would have given another $700,000 for the results to have come back a different way, but I couldn't. He wasn't my son, and that was the end of it. And after I left that place with him, I went back to the hotel and thought, I'm going to go crazy on Soy Cowboy tonight, and I'm going to call my wife on video and tell her what I found out. I never called her like that. I was just being dramatic at the time, but I did go out and I can't remember the night because I got so drunk. And the following morning, my wife calls me asking if I'm feeling better, and I said no, I'm feeling far worse. I had an interesting meeting with your son's father yesterday. I think you need to come to Bangkok, and you'd better leave your son there. I hung up before she had a chance to say anything else, and I didn't answer when she called back. I wondered if she'd put 2 and 2 together, or was she still oblivious to what was going on? But she arrived in Bangkok at around 4 a.m, so I take it that she was a bit concerned. I was too drunk to say anything, but she kept saying, what's wrong, and I pointed to the results which I'd left out on the dresser. I remember her saying not possible, but then I fell asleep and woke up in the morning and she was there, saying that this wasn't possible, he was my son, and I asked her how she could explain the fact that we'd had 3 DNA tests done and they all came back saying he wasn't a match, and that I went to speak to the German guy who went away with us, and he said that he did things with you. How are you meant to explain that away? She couldn't, and she said she had no idea. She always thought he was mine and she was sorry, and then she said, can we just pretend that this never happened? I was not going to be one of those guys who would accept something like that, and I just said no. I never want to see him again. It's not his fault, and I feel bad for him, but this is the biggest form of humiliation that any guy can ever face. And you've pushed this onto me, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not accepting this. It's over. Our relationship is over. And everything, up in the village, the business, everything, I want nothing more to do with it. We're through. She started crying hysterically, saying she was so sorry. Could I forgive her? And then the worst thing was she started throwing herself all over me, trying to get me to change my mind. What kind of crazy individual can think something as serious as that can be forgotten based on her doing something like that? I mean, if it was something like she'd accidentally lost her phone and wanted a new one, oh, okay, that's the sort of thing I would expect. But I wouldn't expect something like that given the fact that I'd just found out that the son I was raising, all the money I'd spent on him, and the fact that I'd completely changed my dream retirement for her son, I wasn't living the way I expected to live in retirement. It was a dreadful situation and it destroyed me. She didn't want to leave the hotel, and I kept telling her, you've got no choice. There's nothing you can do to make me change my mind. This is a thing I'm not prepared to accept. The fact that you cheated on me as well is bad enough. But the fact that you had me raising someone else's son, no, that's not something I'm prepared to accept. And eventually, she did leave. Rather ironically, I received a phone call from the agent about half an hour after she left asking how things were going in terms of getting the DNA test results. But when I told them the truth, they were rather stunned, as you'd expect. But I said thank you so much for telling me about this permanent residence thing, because without it, I would never have known the truth. I felt humiliated, I felt degraded, and I just felt disgusting. Disgusting is the only word to describe it, and then I had to start thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my retirement. My wife was continuously trying to call me multiple times, but I didn't answer. I didn't have anything important at our house in Isan. I had the business, and I called my guy and told him what had happened, and I told him I'd transfer my shares to him. Anything to make sure she didn't get them. And because he already owned 2%, he was now the majority owner, so that was a big positive, and I don't know what happened from there. That was the last I spoke with him. I decided to sell my condo in Bangkok. I wanted to sell it as quickly as I possibly could, so I put it on for 75% of its value, and I had an offer within a week, and that was sold, and I got rid of it. I thought about pursuing my wife through the courts for half of everything, but the problem was the house in the village, that couldn't be sold easily. I mean, it was very difficult to sell. The car we had for a number of years now, and it wasn't like these Japanese cars that hold their value in Thailand. The German cars depreciate a lot, so probably only had $1 million in that and a bit. And then the shop house. It just all seemed like it would be too much work, and I had my income coming in, and I decided that I was just going to leave Thailand. I did contact my agent one more time, saying I wanted to get divorced from her, and I asked them to arrange with her to come down and do it properly, otherwise I would take her to court and take half of everything. So that was the last I saw of her, when we went to the district office to get divorced, and she was crying all the time, saying she was so sorry, could I forgive her? Absolutely not. From there, I was single again. Because of that, I had no marriage visa anymore, and I had 7 days to leave the country. I could have switched to a retirement visa, but I had no desire to live in Thailand anymore. The problem was then, where do I move? I don't want to go back to my own country, even though I've got enough money to do that. I don't really want to go anywhere in Europe. I decided, because it wasn't of interest to me, and I've spent months in my life in South America, and I didn't really want to live there. So it seemed like the best options were countries in the region. I decided to fly first to Cambodia to have a look there, but I didn't really like it. Next to Vietnam, which was okay, and the Philippines, which again was okay, but I preferred Thailand so much, but I didn't want to be there. I eventually decided that I would live in Vietnam, and that's where I am today, and I have a good life. I'm not short of money, I don't want for anything, but I still think back to that time when that happened, because it was so awful to witness. I have no idea what she's doing now, no idea what her son is doing now, and to be honest, I couldn't give a flying F.
60 years of moving in one direction, and 3 years to mess it all up. That is how I would sum up my life up until this point. I'm 63 years old at the moment, and reeling from some of the most stupid decisions I've ever made. I know now that everything I did was wrong, but at the time I believed what I was doing was the right thing. I bet some guys are going to call me a simp. I didn't like that word, but if you feel like that's what I am, go right ahead.
Unfortunately, I wasn't aware that there were so many online resources that could let people know what they were getting themselves into by going to Thailand. I was 60 years old at the time, and I tried my level best to stay away from computers and smartphones. I was just an old school analog guy. Thailand, to me, were conversations you had with friends who had spoken to their other friends who told them about that one time in Thailand. That's what got me excited about Thailand, not knowing what I was getting myself into, not knowing anything about the country apart from seeing a few documentaries on normal television. Maybe seeing a few pictures in the guidebooks. That was all I'd seen of Thailand. Nothing to do with the social media malarkey that I have recently discovered. So I think that my idea of Thailand was based on a nostalgic worldview of what Thailand was like possibly 30 years ago. That was the first thing I did wrong. But what I did know was that Thailand was a place that people went to retire. In my social group, I knew two guys who had left and moved to Thailand. Both of them got married to these amazing girls that at home would have been out of their league, and they were both living the good life in Thailand. I was never able to have a serious relationship at home. It's not that I didn't want one, it's just that I wasn't able to make it happen. I tried dating all throughout my 20s and 30s, but it never led to anything serious. I don't know if it was because I was too picky or I was looking for something that may have been unrealistic, but I just gave up in my mid to late 30s, as it was going to be something that wasn't going to happen. I think because of that, I had built Thailand up throughout the years, about hearing jokes on the television about what Thailand was known for, and the years of talking about those stories that you heard about friends of friends. I thought Thailand was a place for people like me to go to be able to meet girls that I wasn't able to meet at home. In a way, that is accurate, but I was going in under the impression it wasn't all about the money. The fact that it was money-based kind of defeated the whole point, but I didn't know that at the time. 60 was when I could finally retire. I had a pension at work. It wasn't a lot of money. I had no savings. I never bought a house and I rented all my life, which I suppose was a big mistake. All the money I had spent, and I didn't spend a lot of money because I didn't make a lot, but my private pension at 60 gave me an income of £1,300 every month. When people talked about Thailand being cheap, I thought that meant Thailand was cheap for everything. It was my plan to move there for a long time when I was 60. I'd never been to visit, but I bigged Thailand up in my mind to be a place that would fix all my problems and give me what I wasn't able to have at home. I had visions of myself sitting on a beach, staying in a luxury hotel with a beautiful girl that loved me by my side. That's what I thought I would be able to have in Thailand on the income I had, because people said that Thailand was cheap. How cheap and what was cheap, they never really said. A guy down the pub talking about how he was in Thailand and it was proper cheap. He lived like a king, he said. I knew he didn't have a lot of money, so you take things like that, little snippets that you hear, and build this picture about Thailand that might not be accurate. But with these preconceived ideas, I booked a one-way ticket to Thailand with the idea of seeing out my days there. The first problem happened when I arrived at the airport. I gave them my ticket and passport, and they asked me where was my onward flight. What onward flight? I hadn't booked one. I'd booked a one-way ticket because I was going to retire in Thailand. They informed me that I didn't have a visa, therefore I needed an onward ticket. And they had to enforce it because if they didn't, and I arrived in Thailand and I wasn't let in, they would be responsible for paying for me to return home. They did tell me it didn't have to be a ticket home, so I could book one to a neighbouring country and not use it, so that's what I had to do. I still didn't have a smartphone, and I was never someone who liked technology, but I got out my big laptop and spent an hour trying to find some way to book a ticket, but I did eventually get one to Malaysia in 28 days' time. Didn't plan to use it, and it was a waste of money, But it was a small issue that was sorted out, and they eventually let me check into my flight. I booked direct on Thai Airways, and 11 and a half later, and 11 and a half hours later, I'm touching down in Bangkok. The only thing I knew what to do was to get a taxi and show them the name of my hotel. I changed some money to Thai baht back in England. That was a huge mistake. The rates they were giving in Thailand were way better, but I didn't know anything about that. The markup in England must have been something like 20 or 30%, but in Thailand it seemed to be a small fraction of that, so that was a lesson I learned. I only changed a couple of £100, so it wasn't dreadful, but I knew if I ever had to return for whatever reason, I wouldn't change cash in England again. I suppose many guys already know that, but I didn't know, so if you don't know, you don't do. The taxi took me to the hotel that I booked, and I just stayed there until the following morning. I was excited to be in Thailand and live the experiences that I'd heard about. That's why I was there after all, to enjoy myself, to take advantage of being somewhere that was far cheaper than where I came from. I was staying in Nha Nha, and when I first walked onto the streets, it wasn't anything like I pictured in my mind. It wasn't a positive or a negative. At this point, it was just different to how I pictured it. I did go into the first restaurant that I saw and ordered some food and a drink. I enjoyed it, nothing wrong with it, and what I was served was good. But when I calculated how much it cost, I didn't feel like it was actually cheap like people said. You hear people say Thailand is cheap, you can have a meal for £1 or £2. You might be able to, but in this Italian restaurant it was £30. Not quite what I was expecting. I walked around for a few hours just taking in all the sights. It was a shock, I think, is the only way to describe what it felt like being there. Such a different place to where I came from. But I went into some of the bars on Soi 4 and thought today I'm going to have a drinking day. My first day in Thailand, let's make it one to remember. I was shocked when the beers I was drinking were averaging £3 for a small bottle. I was expecting it to be at most £1 or £1.50. After spending time in Thailand, I did soon discover that you need to go to the local places to get proper prices. Everywhere that you might actually want to go in terms of a tourist, you're not going to get local prices. It just doesn't work like that. But at this point, I'm just having a good time, and I start talking to a girl there. I listened to another story on your channel, and that guy was ridiculed in the comments because he said that he thought that the girls that worked in the bar didn't want to be there, hated being there, but hoped to meet a foreigner to get married to. That's what I thought was going on as well. I thought that these girls were working there, putting up with things that they had to put up with, for the hopes that they could meet a husband that could take care of them, and that she could take care of. So I didn't think it's fair to say that I'm stupid for thinking that way. It was always talked about in England, the conversation that you have with people about Thailand and people who went to Thailand and told their stories. It was always portrayed as being the girls that worked in these bars wanted to be rescued. Rescued might be such a strong word, and it might not be correct, but they just wanted to meet someone so they could get out of the situation they were in. I didn't come to this idea from nothing. I came to it from how I thought it was. But the girl I was talking to, although great, was 24, and I thought that that was too young. I was 60, and I thought that a suitable age gap, if I was a foreigner and she was a Thai, would have been around 25 years. So if I could find someone who was 35, that was my dream age. I had a good time in the bars, but I didn't like the prices there. It felt too expensive for where we were in the world, but I just thought maybe this is the price you have to pay in order to be able to be in the company of girls who are looking for marriage. I left the last bar and went for some dinner. Again, I felt the prices were quite a lot more than I was expecting them to be, and I must repeat that I had learned that you can eat affordable in Thailand, but it's going to be Thai food in a Thai location without the entertainment around you that we had. So it swings and roundabouts really. You want to come to Thailand and live the Thailand life? As a tourist, it's no cheaper than what I used to spend when I went to Spain. It's actually probably more expensive in Thailand if you factor in the flights. But if you want to go and live like a Thai, I found out that it can be cheap, but it's no fun. I booked into my hotel for a week, and I just wanted to get to know my way around this part of the city because it is where I expected to be living. I didn't even go on the SkyTrain anywhere. I just stayed around Nana. But I was enjoying myself, but spending more money than I wanted to. I thought with my £1,300 I would be able to be out every day and night of the week until I met someone. But if I'm being perfectly honest, £1,300 would have been enough for 1 week living it up around that part of Bangkok, not 1 month. I knew that if I wanted to stay in Thailand and live here, I'd have to do something very different. I was lucky to meet an expat after I'd been in Thailand for a week who had been living there a long time, and he was able to tell me so much information that nobody back home used to talk about. No one talked about which parts of Bangkok were cheaper, where to go to get more affordable things. No one talked about that. It was all about the girls and how they were looking for people just like me. But after I spoke to that expat, it gave me confidence to get on the SkyTrain and go a little bit further out to see what things were like. He told me he lived in Expat, and he said a few stations further than that it would be cheaper. He said On Nut would be a good place to start, so that's where I went first. Immediately, it felt different than Nana. I don't know if I liked it more or not. I suppose I liked everything about it, but there weren't any of the bars that I wanted there to be there. That was one of the things I found out after a few years in Thailand. I wanted the local Thai feel. I wanted everything to be Thai. I didn't want to see any other foreigners anywhere, but I wanted a few bars that they had in the tourist areas to be in this place, and the ability to get the food that I liked in this place. But I wanted everything. I wanted a local Thailand feel, but with the Western delicacies that I liked, and bars, and therefore bar girls. But that was not possible. But I did go to a small Thai restaurant in On Nut, and when I got the bill, it was cheap. £3 for a big bowl of noodles and a drink. I thought that was great, but that's not what I wanted to be cheap. I wanted a pizza to be £3 including a drink. But I did get used to that very quickly, and I started to eat like a local 6 days a week, because that's all I could afford on the budget I had. It was in On Nut that I rented a condo, a studio unit in an older building, and it was 6,000 baht a month. I knew I needed to get a visa, and I wanted to do the retirement visa, but for that I would have needed to have had money in the bank, which I didn't have. But after doing a bit of research, there was a company in Pattaya that could help you get the visa you needed for 20,000 baht. So I used them and got my retirement visa. After living in Bangkok for 2 months, I was already quite bored of it. I had been down to Pattaya when I did my retirement visa, but I didn't like it there. I liked the bars, but I wanted it to be quieter and more peaceful, but that just didn't exist. I wanted to go somewhere else, but I hadn't found anyone yet. I was desperately looking for a partner, but it was expensive going to the bars, so I could only go twice a week. And then I couldn't have many drinks because I had to stay in budget. I was lucky to go only a few weeks later. I met a girl then. That was in a bar in Sukhumvit. Before I get into that, I'm not going to be telling you whereabouts this was, because I'm going to admit it. She's actually back there working now, and I don't want to say where it is just because. But when I met her, I wasn't even planning on going into her bar. She was sat outside with a few other girls on the street, and I saw her from the other side of the street, and I crossed the road to talk to her. I hadn't yet learned one word of Thai, so I was hoping that her English was reasonable. I'd spoken to some girls who couldn't even have basic conversations with me, and I wanted her English to be at least acceptable. When I got to the bar, I looked at her and went inside, and she followed me and I ordered a drink and one for her. I spent the rest of the day in that bar, and we probably had 5 or 6 drinks each. I told her everything about what I was doing, what I was hoping to find. I'm new in Thailand and I'm looking for a wife. I wanted to know what she was looking for, what was she looking for in a partner, and other information about her. Just to try and avoid those silly comments, I want to say again that it was my understanding up until this point that the girls working in the bars were looking to stop working in the bars as soon as possible, because they wanted to fall in love with a foreigner. And I'm not shy to admit it, so you can picture me sitting in the bar asking her questions such as, what are you looking for in a partner? I'm looking for someone who is around 35 and who wants to spend their life with me. I also need to say that when she spoke to me and answered the questions I was asking, she didn't look at me like I was strange or like I was asking odd questions. She answered the questions like they were perfectly normal. So that reinforced my beliefs that this is what bars in Thailand were all about. I knew you could just go in and have a good time with the girls, but I thought ultimately they wanted to leave the bar with a foreigner to look after them. I thought because I had £1,300 a month, which translated to about 55,000 baht, I thought I was a great suitor for the girls, and the girl I was speaking to answered all the questions in the way I would have answered them, and she was the first girl that I ever felt like I wanted to get to know more. She was 37, so a good age, only 23 years younger than me, so I thought that was perfect. The next 3 months I just spent going back to her bar whenever I could, spending time with her, talking with her, and taking her out of the bar, and after 3 months I felt like she was the one. I asked her to move in with me and stop working the bar, and let's just see how things go. I thought because I had to pay the bar to get her to stop working there, that in a way our future life together would be on my terms, and she would just be happy that she's got someone. Most of the girls don't seem to find anyone, so I thought that she was lucky. 3 months in Thailand, 2 years and 9 months to go. She did have a child from a previous relationship, and listening to other stories, it seems to be quite commonplace. But her child lived with her parents in the village. One of the things she always talked about was that it was her dream to one day move back to her village and build a house and start a business and be a success there. I admired her ambition and her dreams, but I didn't think I was able to give her that. I could give her a life without working, but not much more than that. I think she could see that I loved her, and the first thing we arranged on was that she could have 10,000 baht a month as an allowance to buy her own food and other little bits and pieces that she might need across the course of a month. And for the first 3 months, things go brilliantly. I'm falling more for her, and I felt like the fact that I walked past her bar and she was outside was fate. If she was inside, or if she turned away, or if it was her day off, I wouldn't have seen her, and I wouldn't be in this amazing relationship that I was now in. I felt like I was now ready to get married. I'd always dreamed of getting married, but I wanted it to be someone that I felt was reflective of how I felt inside, and she definitely was reflective of how I felt inside. And we did get married, and that took us up to her village, the village where she dreamed of building a house and starting a business. When we got to the village, it was everything I thought Thailand was going to be in Bangkok. Backwards, quaint, like nowhere else you'd ever been, like no dreams you'd ever had before. And yes, that is how I expected Bangkok to be, with the high-rises and the bars. But it was perfect. I could definitely see why she wanted to move back there, because I could see myself living there. I was from a small town at home, and I struggled with how busy Bangkok was, and then I remembered that I was only in Bangkok because of the bars were there, and that's where the girls were there. So I didn't need to be in Bangkok anymore because I already had a wife. We weren't actually married yet, but this is what I'm thinking. And it was said that I needed to pay sinsot to get married as part of Thai culture. I wasn't sure about this, but I wanted to respect the culture and how things worked in Thailand, and they only wanted 100,000 baht because she had been married before and had a child. I took a cash advance on my credit card to pay for this and thought I could pay back £100 a month out of my income to cover it. It was no big deal, and I wanted my first marriage to start off in the best way possible. The marriage ceremony itself was different. Monks, cheap plastic chairs on a mud floor, people sitting on what looked like tables, but they were half the height of a table, and eating with their legs crossed on the floor. What a different experience this was. But I felt like this was the real Thailand now, and because I had a wife, I was able to spend more time in the real Thailand. The thoughts of going back to Bangkok were not great. I didn't want to be back in Bangkok. We were staying in her family's house when we got married, but it was only small, so we had to stay in a tent outside.
that I had to buy from the big supermarket in town. It wasn't exactly how I pictured spending my wedding night, but it was fun and a bit different, a story to tell friends that I might make in Thailand in the future. Following day, we registered the marriage legally, and I felt like the dream I had for much of my adult life was finally a reality. Here I was with a girl who I thought was perfect, in the real part of Thailand, with no other foreign people anywhere to be seen. I wanted to stay there. I didn't know how, but I wanted to stay there. She told me that there was a good restaurant not so far away from the house. They sold seafood and other nice dishes, and it was very popular in the local area. We decided to go, and she drove the family's motorbike, and I was on the back, but it was actually 25 minutes on the bike before we got there, and it was a scary ride. But going through the back streets of this village on the way to the main town, it was again what I was expecting Thailand to actually be like. The only thing it needed was a bar like the ones in Sukhumvit, but priced like bars in this area. Food was really good at the restaurant, and it was busy, very popular with the locals. We paid the bill and had some drinks, and it was something like 600 baht. We had so much food and drink, and it was only 600 baht. Deep down, I actually felt a bit mad. If you can charge 600 baht for this, why can't you charge similar prices in the areas where foreigners go? It hadn't twigged on me yet that it was all about the money. We got back on the motorbike and drove to a dam in the area, just something to look at. And when we were there, that's when she said that it was her dream to have a restaurant just like the one we'd been at. I thought that sounded like such a fun thing to do. Imagine having a restaurant like that in rural Thailand, and people coming from far and wide to eat some of the best food in the area. She said, "Can I take you to look at my land? This is where I want to build it." It sounded good to me, so we drove back in the direction of her village, and 20 minutes later she pulls the bike up next to some land that was covered in trees. It was on the outskirts of the village, but it was on a proper tarmac road and had electric going past it. She said she bought the land 15 years ago, and it's always been her dream to open the restaurant there and have a house at the back. It did look more than big enough to have a house at the back and a restaurant at the front, and we started talking about how she pictured the restaurant to look. It was obvious that she'd given it so much thought. She said there would be a walkway here with a spiral around and a gravel path. Plants would be hanging down, and if you walked past the entranceway there would be a pond with fish at the front and a bridge crossing the pond to get into the restaurant. She would serve good quality Thai food, similar to the restaurant that we'd just been at. She said she was a great cook and she'd love to cook for me that evening. That meant another long motorbike trip to the supermarket to get some ingredients. And then we're driving back on the bike, and I've got this big bag on my knee and she's driving, and it was a very weird feeling. There was no way I would come close to sit on the back of a motorbike with no helmet on and a big bag of groceries on my knee at home, but I felt so free and liberated to be able to do this in Thailand and not have anyone say anything to me. That evening, she cooked, and it was a really delicious meal. She cooked a curry and a dried dish. I don't know what they were called, but they were delicious. And she grilled up some squid and made a sauce for it, and that was great. I'd always loved cuisines from different parts of the world, and Thai food was always one of my favourite, and her cooking was brilliant. I wanted that restaurant as well now. We did have to return to Bangkok because I was due to pay the rent on the condo, and I was still paying in cash to the landlord at a particular day every month, so that made us have to go back to Bangkok. But when we were there, sitting in that tiny condo, I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be sitting in my own restaurant, watching people coming in, and my wife cooking and living her dream, and me living my retirement dream. That's when I asked her more questions about how much would it cost to open the restaurant, how much does she think she could make from it. I know she'd given it so much thought. I thought she must have thought about how much it's going to cost, how much can she sell and things like that. I thought that she must have given equally as much thought to this as what it was going to look like. But she said she didn't know, but she would think about it, and she actually took out a notebook and pen and started writing things down. I thought that was really sweet.
She was chatting to some people in the village on the Line application, but I still refused to get a smartphone. I wasn't interested in them. But she did then say that the restaurant would cost about 800,000 baht to build, and she thought she could make about 30,000 baht every month. The 800,000 baht should also include all the things that we would need in the restaurant, like tables and cooking facilities, for everything. When she said 800,000 baht, although I didn't have the money, I was quite excited, because I did have money left on my credit card that I could use if I needed to. My credit limit was £25,000, and although I'd used some of it for the dowry when I got married, I could use the rest, and we could get this restaurant opened and have the first profits used to pay back the credit card. And then when it was paid back, we'd have even more income, and then we could use the credit card again to build a house. I told everything to my wife about my financial position, and that we needed to borrow the money to do this, and we needed to pay it back. And she said she was happy to do everything. She was happy to pay the money back as long as she had the money she needed to live on. And we could use everything else to pay back the credit card. I gave it a lot of thought, but I still wasn't sure. But when she included in the price that we could get a room at the back of the restaurant and turn it into a bedroom and we could live there, I was sold. First thing though, I wanted to go on a small honeymoon with my wife before we started on this business adventure together. We went to Hua Hin and stayed in a beautiful hotel, and went out every night for great food and drinks and walks on the beach. It was a fantastic time that I had with my wife. I felt like I was in my element. I was about to embark on a brand new adventure, and this is what the spoils of that adventure would give us when things worked out. I pictured in the future us being able to travel every few months to different parts of Thailand, have staff working at the restaurant who could cook just as well as my wife, and build it into something that would heighten my stay in Thailand, and also give my wife purpose and the chance to make a good income. I loved Hua Hin. I wish I'd been there before, because I could have seen myself living there in retirement, but we were already set on the idea of going up to her village and moving forward with our plans. We went back to Bangkok, and I gave up the lease on my condo. I only took it out on a 6-month lease, and that had come to an end, so they gave the deposit back. But at this point, I'd accumulated a few things, and added together with my wife's things, it was a bit too much stuff for us to take on the bus with us, so I paid 5,000 baht for a taxi to take us up to her village. Definitely money well spent, and such a convenience to be able to stop any time you wanted to, and avoid the hassle of having to use the bus. The closest hotel to her village was about an 8-minute drive away, and it was only 400 baht a night, so it was a plan to stay there until we could move into the room at the back of our restaurant. I'd taken all the money off my card, and I was going to be using £500 a month out of my income to pay it back over the first 6 months, and then pay back a lot more after that. The person that my wife had contacted previously to build the restaurant came to us and said what my wife said she knew already. I therefore paid the deposit, and only 6 weeks later the restaurant was already built. All the trees had been removed from the land, and it was actually a really good plot, and the restaurant looked great. It wasn't a posh kind of place, but it did look like it was inviting and that people would want to sit inside or outside. We had it set up so there was parking at the entrance, and there were some bushes and a walkway through the bushes in the middle, and a big open area that was under cover for when it rained, and adjoining that was the indoor restaurant, the kitchen, and our bedroom. I found that I was struggling to pay back the monthly payments on the credit card. I was only able to pay £300 a month for the first 3 months, but I felt confident that since the restaurant was now ready to go, we were going to make some money soon. My wife was so excited, and I was really happy and excited. She told all her friends about the restaurant, and in turn her friends had told people, and on opening day I was expecting to be really busy all day. A few of her friends came, but it was a massive anticlimax. I trusted my wife knew what she was doing, and she told me it was going to be busy. She told me how much she could make, but on that day she made about 100 baht. I knew it was still early on into the business, but that was really upsetting. I'd taken on debt in order to do this business, with the idea that this would make our future better. But if the first day was going to be anything to go on, it wasn't going to be a future.
1 year in Thailand, 2 years to go. Another 3 months go by and people are coming to the restaurant, but my wife isn't making enough money. When I ask her money to pay back the credit card, she said I need to use it to live on. And I tried to explain to her that you told me how much you were going to make, and I believed you, and I need to be able to pay back this credit card. Having money for herself and her children, she put in front of the debt that I had taken on, and that was the first time that I missed a payment. I couldn't afford to pay the credit card. I'd never missed a payment on a credit card in my life, and I just missed the payment. I had to call the credit card company and tell them I'm sorry, I'll pay back soon. But the month after I missed again, and the month after, I tried to put this to the back of my mind and just hope that things would pick up over time, but they never seemed to pick up. The big piece of land at the back of the restaurant that was meant to be where our house was going to be built was now getting overgrown with bushes and grass. The beach resorts where we were meant to be going for time off work, they were there without us, and I just didn't understand what was happening. I thought I did everything right. I was open and honest with her when I met her that I was looking for a wife. I thought she was looking for a husband. She had a dream to open a restaurant that was going to make 30,000 baht a month, but she was making 10,000 baht a month, if that, and keeping all the money. And I'm starting to get worried. After she'd been making 10,000 baht a month for 3 months, I'm still giving her the same until this point, and I told her that now, because you're making this money, I can stop giving you 10,000 baht a month so I can pay back the credit card that I used to open the restaurant. I was expecting her to say, of course, that's fine, but she just looked at me and said, no, you have to give me 10,000 baht a month because that's what we agreed on. When I tried to say, I thought we agreed that you're going to be making 30,000 baht a month, and then 20,000 of that you're going to be giving me to pay back the credit card. Once it's paid back, then we can start living a life and building a house. She said yes, but that hasn't happened yet, so she doesn't need to do it. That was the first time when I was upset with my wife. I overlooked everything I didn't like because I thought it was just that she was from a different culture. I respected her culture. I didn't like when she did lots of things, but it wasn't for me to have an opinion about that because it was her culture and that's how she did things. And it was a sacrifice in a way for me to be able to get what I wanted, which was a wife who could take care of me and who loved me and who looked like I wanted my wife to look. I was now getting lots of posts going to my friend's house where I had registered all my banking information. Lots of letters coming, asking for money and added interest onto the credit cards, and I'm really starting to panic. I'd never been in this position and my wife wasn't helping me. I just told my friend to say return to sender and say that the person doesn't live here. But time's going on and I'm just struggling and not enjoying myself because I've got this debt that's growing. Eventually it's passed on to a debt collection agency and I'm just not able to pay it back. I'm struggling even to have enough money to treat myself to a beer and everything seemed to be just going downhill. I'm still holding on to the hope that the restaurant will pick up and she'll start making more money, but nothing's happening. And she's lucky if she makes 10,000 baht a month. Sometimes she only makes 5. And she's having money from me, and I've got a debt building up, and I can't afford to pay it. 2 years in Thailand, 1 year to go. I'm living month to month during my last year in Thailand. I put the fact that I've got a debt on the credit card to the back of my mind. My friend has fallen out with me because of all the posts that keeps going to his house about the credit card, and my wife stopped working in the restaurant and left it empty. She said she didn't make enough money. Now she's asking me for more money and the stress is starting to take a toll on me. I don't even have enough money to pay for a plane ticket home. I was lucky to scrape together money to get a new retirement visa when I needed to. That was 20,000 baht. And my wife, because I physically can't give her anything else, is now a new person, leaving me to myself in the small room behind the restaurant. Not even turning the air conditioning on at this point, and it's like an oven. There's no insulation, and I thought maybe it's time to come to terms with the fact that I need to leave, and I need to go home because I'd failed, and I need to declare bankruptcy. I didn't know how to tell my wife. I just left one day, and left a note saying, sorry, I can't give you the money you wanted, but you were meant to pay me back the money I borrowed to build the restaurant for you, and you didn't, so I'm leaving Thailand.
She called me when I was already on the bus to Bangkok. She didn't try to get me to come back. She just said what a bad man I was and that I ruined her life and that she was going to work back in the bar. That was the last that I heard from her. I got back to England and I begged my friend to let me stay at his house, even though all the credit card stuff had happened. I was thankful that he let me, and I declared bankruptcy, and for the last 6 months I've been living hand to mouth in my friend's caravan that's parked up outside his house. I was lucky that I got to keep my income, because that's the only income I had, and I needed it to live on, so they couldn't take that away. But it was when I got back home, after being in Thailand, that I'd started learning more about it. I'd never heard of YouTube before, but I didn't know there was all this stuff available. I didn't know that girls that worked in the bars weren't looking for love. I didn't know building something in her village was a bad idea. Then, I didn't know we wouldn't make any money. I just believed her. We were in her country. Why wouldn't I believe her? I wouldn't tell her something in my country that wasn't true. But I suppose she was playing me, and she didn't get much from me because I didn't have much. But that was the worst 3 years of my life.
I used to think it was just me who had his life completely destroyed in Thailand. I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't realise just how common an occurrence it actually was. It pains me to understand that so many people have had their lives ruined in Thailand, yet when they were doing what they were doing, they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were moving in the direction that would eventually take them to where they wanted to be, to get to retirement and enjoy themselves. That description so very accurately describes myself. Would I have gone to Thailand in the first place if I had enough money to retire at home? That's a very difficult question to ask. I can't say one way or the other because I actually really liked Thailand. Thailand to me offered many advantages to life at home. I never liked cold weather or rain and getting up early in the morning and it's freezing cold. And even with the heating on, when you go for a shower, you're still visibly uncomfortable. It only takes one trip to Thailand to understand that it shouldn't be like that. And then you return home and everything just feels a little bit off, a little bit wrong and not how things should be. That's when you start looking at Thailand as a possibility to make your life and how you always thought it was going to be. I think that's the best way I can sum it up. But to say I'm a former shadow of myself wouldn't be accurately hitting on how I actually feel because of what had happened. I feel like I had the best of intentions, a lifelong dream to follow, and I was doing everything on the understanding that I would be respected and looked after in a way that I always thought I would be. That didn't happen. How I found myself in Thailand was purely by coincidence. Before I went, I was still one of the guys who had false notions about Thailand, that it was purely a destination where you would go to do certain things. The nightlife and the bars, and yes, when you get there, they are amazing and a good part of Thailand. But you do understand that there is so much more to the country than that. It's like the nightlife and the bars are the highlight, the icing on the cake, but you still had the really delicious cake which makes up the bulk of the country. But it was a guy at work who kept talking about Thailand and how much he loved it. He kept talking about it again and again, and I'd be overhearing these conversations he's having with other people in the office. That's when I started to look at Thailand as a place to go. I was never one of the cool and chatty guys who was comfortable striking up conversations in the office. As far as I was concerned, I was in the office to work and get money, not to make friends. If I was paid to make friends, then I might have made more of an effort, but I didn't want to be there or at that job. I didn't want to have to wake early and get there and drive an hour to go home in the evenings, and I didn't want to do any of that. I was just doing it because I didn't have anything else to do and I had no choice. But it was overhearing those conversations that I first started to consider going to Thailand myself. This was 2015. I was 54 years old and I was still working in telesales. I used to sell advertising for an online directory. It was very boring, very poorly paid, But if you managed to pick up a sale, you did get a commission on top. So you could make 20% or 30% if you were doing okay. That meant you might bring in between £25,000 and £40,000 a year. Not a fortune by any stretch of the imagination, and at 54, and you're still doing something like this, you start to understand that there needs to be some kind of escape. There needs to be something else I can do. The years had dragged on. I worked that same job for 20 years, and every single time a new year rolls around, you say to yourself, this year I will escape. This is the year I will stop degrading myself on a daily basis for money. To touch on the feelings I had about degrading myself in that job, I feel everybody degrades themselves when they're working, if it's something that you don't want to do. Yet when I found myself in Thailand in the same year, 2015, around October, and I introduced myself to the amazing nightlife, I actually didn't think the girls that worked there were degrading themselves. I thought they had the best job in the world, and I wished I was able to do something like that. Perhaps from a man's perspective, and a man who never had any luck getting into a relationship throughout his life, perhaps from a man's perspective like that, it is different. But I just looked at those girls as being my equals, as being people who understand what it is like to be me, from a similar place on the social ladder. Yet because I came from England and they came from Thailand, I had a bit of a leg up and an advantage. That's how I saw it, nothing more or nothing less. Thailand was a place that you could reinvent yourself. Please notice how I say Thailand was, and I use the word could, because these were opinions I held at the time. I no longer hold these opinions. Thailand isn't a place that you can reinvent yourself. It doesn't really work like that, I've found. That's what my intention was, to be a different person, the person I'd always wanted to be, that I didn't have a chance to. And that's everything I thought Thailand was about. Coming to learn that the guys that seemed to be successful in Thailand, they're not the ones seeking to completely reinvent themselves. They're the ones who enjoyed being in their own country, yet perhaps prefer Thailand for a number of reasons. They're not hoping Thailand can change everything about themselves. So I think that's important to note. For me, I had everything riding on the fact that Thailand was meant to be my change of life. It was meant to improve my life to such a level that I would be able to equate myself to my boss's boss from my old job. Perhaps not as wealthy, yet you didn't need to be wealthy because you were in Thailand and because you had the availability of all these wonderful things. You could get into relationships with girls that your boss's boss was getting into back at home, yet in Thailand this was open to you and it felt great. Joe Average is the best way to describe myself. And I want to talk how I got sucked into Thailand and made some of the biggest mistakes ever. But it was after hearing that conversation at work and booking time off work and arranging that first holiday that I decided to go. 2 weeks in Thailand, and I had an awful lot riding on it, because from what I had heard being discussed, this could be it. This could be the answer that I'd been looking for my whole life. I was a nervous wreck when I got off the plane. Never been further than Benidorm. And in Thailand, I was still of the mind that you were going to get something planted in your luggage or get pulled over and thrown into one of the Thai jails. All those stereotypes that you hear about Thailand at home, but as soon as you land, you find out are completely wrong. Thailand was nothing like that. Nothing at all. The airport you're landing in is far more modern and better than the one you set off from. The length of time it takes to get your bag as opposed to at home is so much quicker and a lot more efficient. Everything they seem to do there was on a different level than how it was at home. So your first impressions are great, and you no longer feel like a nervous wreck when you go down to the bottom of the airport and get the train to the middle of the city. Seeing people from all different countries around the world is quite interesting. Usually in Spain, you might see English people and other Europeans, but in Thailand, there were people from every corner of the globe, and it really felt like a melting pot of excitement. The train exits the airport after a few minutes in the dark tunnel, and then you can see Bangkok in front of you. A few stations later, you're getting closer to the city, and the excitement is starting to build, and your heart's starting to pump at full speed. You're wondering, what is the experience going to be like? You get off at the PR Thai station and change to the BTS, where I had a hotel booked in Nana. I'd done a lot of research after deciding I wanted to go to Thailand, but I didn't want to speak to anybody about it at work, because this was a me thing. I didn't want to be some other guy telling me how to do it. I wanted to do what I had researched myself and do it my way. My way was meant to be better, I thought. I'm pumping as I'm walking down the steps at Nana BTS station. Everyone says it, but you have to say it to make the story make sense. It's damn hot, really hot, and it's not like you're used to it. I wasn't, and I was struggling to walk. I mean, I could still walk, but by the time I made it to my hotel halfway down Soy 11, I was already out of breath and in need of a shower. You quickly learned that showering regularly in Thailand is a must. It was on the way to that hotel that I noticed a little bar on the left. It seemed like it was just opening, but there were 3 or 4 girls sitting inside. You think to yourself, is this one of those bars that you read about online? And you reason to yourself, no, it's not possible. It's not possible, but these amazing girls work there. They're just too perfect. Perhaps my expectations were not as high as some guys, but from a guy from England, mid-50s, slightly bald, fat, my eyes were as wide as possible in amazement as I stood still on the pavement and looked in awe at the bar. When I got off the plane, I was tired. I wasn't tired anymore, and I walked a little bit further down to where my hotel was, and I had a shower. The first impressions I had dealing with people in Thailand was at the hotel reception, and I found that in Thailand they seemed to take customer service and doing a good job to the next level. The people working there seemed to actually like doing their job. I'm not sure if they did or not. They just were very good at it and looking like they did. I thought back to my job and how much I hated it, and I made it clear as I could that I hated it, and I was only doing it because I didn't have a choice. Was there some kind of difference between where I was and Thailand? In the sense that people in Thailand are seeming to earn a lot less money, yet they seem to be happier than I was, doing a job that is basically on the same level as mine. That's what I thought. I never did my job to the best of my ability because I'm not paid the amount of money that would give me the life I think I should have, so I did my job to the absolute bare minimum. I think it can be reasoned with that perhaps in England living conditions have just deteriorated rapidly over the years, and you look at your parents' generation and see how much easier they had it. Yet in Thailand, it seemed to be the other way round. Perhaps they're still not at the level we are, but compared to their parents, they're a lot higher up. That leads you down the path of thinking, is it because Thailand is getting better that my country is getting worse? On a whole global effect, third world versus first world, you do start having those thoughts, but you do have to get on with it. Of course, I went back to that bar straight away. I almost ran back down the street, just in case I had imagined what I saw. But I hadn't, and I walked in and I ordered a beer, and I sat down, and the rest is history. Don't worry, I didn't get married on the first night to the first girl I met, far from it. But all of a sudden, I was who I thought I'd always been, that I didn't have the opportunity to be. But now in Thailand, I was exactly who I thought I was, speaking to these great girls, laughing and drinking, and whatever happens next. Why wasn't this open to me at home? I felt it should be available to me at home, yet it wasn't. You think about overhearing the conversations at work, and you understand that what they were saying was true, but it was actually a lot better than what they're saying it was. And then you think to yourself, okay, Thailand is it. There's nowhere else I could have a better life. I could not do these things anywhere else. I wasn't yet aware of neighbouring countries or the Philippines. I wasn't understanding these places yet, but I've never been to any of them, so I don't need to point out I know nothing about them. Thailand became my be-all and end-all. I was only in Bangkok for that night, and the night after, but I didn't want to leave. I'd booked down in Pattaya because that was meant to be where the action really was, yet I was quite concerned, thinking there's no way Pattaya can beat Bangkok. Crazy how many guys I've spoken to have said the same things. I was no longer an introvert, by the way. I was an extrovert in Thailand. I don't know how that happened. It just changed. Something changed in me. But what I'm in Thailand for, in one way, is to see if it's a place I want to live. What I'm trying to say is, if you find yourself in Bangkok thinking, This is too good, I can't leave here. Don't worry, a few hours later, you'll find yourself in Pattaya. It makes Bangkok look poor in comparison. I really enjoyed my time in Pattaya. I had read about the warnings about the girls and how you need to be careful. They only want your money and nothing more. But the problem was it didn't feel like that when you were speaking to them. I see the comments and posts written by bitter and jaded guys who didn't really know what they were talking about. Everything I was seeing seemed to show me the exact opposite of what I read. This is the most important thing I'm going to say, at least for now. But you'll read it all the time in the comments, laying into another guy who lost his world to a Thai girl. There are so many warnings out there. How did you not know? You should have known. You're an idiot. You deserve to lose your money and everything else you had. I've seen all the warnings. That's the thing that hurts the most, because I've read them countless times, and I was expecting to go and see these warnings right in front of me. The problem was, it didn't happen like that. Like you walk into a bar, you sit down, you have a drink, a girl comes over, you order a drink for her, and you can tell what she's doing and it's part of her work. But it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like she was doing it as part of her job. I was expecting to feel like when I was in that position and I was good with that. But the problem was you didn't feel like that, even in the slightest. To me, all the warnings I read, all the stories I'd read, I felt like they must have been written by guys who didn't actually know what they were doing or who made so many stupid mistakes. From what I was seeing on the ground, all the guys who warned about it, they just seemed like the sort of guy who wasn't in for a good time, who wasn't interested in finding one of the best girls in the world and having a wonderful relationship. I thought these guys were strange, and I felt I knew exactly what I was doing. I will admit, I thought I knew best. And at that moment in Pattaya, in the first bar, I thought I really did know best when a girl comes over and starts talking, smiling and putting her hand on my lap and laughing at my jokes. I thought she was genuinely interested in me and wanted me for me, and I spent the rest of my holiday with her. 54 years old. That was the best few weeks of my life. If I picked every single other highlight of my life up until then, added them all together, then took the same highlights that had already been taken and somehow times both of these together, you would still have needed to add infinity to this number to say all those life experiences added together were on par with those few weeks. That's how good Thailand was to me. That's how I felt Thailand was. An answer to all my problems. And I felt like I was one of the guys who knew how to do it properly, because all these warnings coming from all these negative stories and all these dire situations that people got themselves in, I just thought it was because they didn't know what they were doing. Everything I was seeing in front of me, everything I was seeing seemed to add credence to the opinions I was having. Confirmation bias is the best way to describe it. You start out being very wary and careful, but then the little things that she does, they all add up to make you feel that she actually loved me. After 2 weeks, I loved her. I would have done anything for her, and I was really happy to understand that she loved me as well. She told me when I left Pattaya. She had tears in her eyes, telling me she really hoped I could come back soon. How she's never seen a guy like me before, never seen a guy as kind or considerate and someone who she wanted to spend more time with. All of a sudden, Thailand became my life. That's all that mattered. And getting back to Thailand to be with this girl that I spent my holiday with, that was the only thing that was important. I felt like she needed me too, so much, and I needed her as well. She was remarkable, 26, and to start with, I was worried about the age difference. But she said she hated younger guys because they didn't know how to treat her properly. She was only interested in someone older because she felt they had more life experience and were able to take care of her better. And in turn, she would be able to take care of him better because of it. She had 3 kids. She was from Ubon Ratchathani, and her kids lived with her parents in the village where she was from, and she sent money every month. Just the usual typical story of girls in Thailand. I felt really bad for her when she was talking about her ex and how he used to beat her, how he used to take all the money and go and spend it on alcohol and time with his friends, and how he would always cheat on her. I really felt so sorry for her, and the thought of being able to be a stable guy in her life really started to excite me. I think I need to put things into context, otherwise the story might not make sense. But at the point in time when I got back after my Thailand trip, all I had to my name was about £40,000 of equity in my house. I could have probably raised an extra £3,000 or £4,000 selling my car, and that did scare me in the sense that I didn't know how to get back to Thailand. That was my world now, everything. But I wanted to go back to Thailand, because that's all that mattered. But most of all, I wanted to be with her because she was the love of my life. I spoke to her regularly. By regularly, I mean every single day. I felt amazing when I was able to send her some money to help support the family. It's important to clarify that I'm describing my feelings at the time and trying to indicate why all the warning signs plastered around everywhere are completely ignored. This is what I was feeling at the time, and the first time I sent her £250, I was absolutely over the moon. She was so grateful and happy, saying she'd be able to look after her kids with this. I felt great in that moment, and I promised to send her £250 every month until I got back. I was a bit upset 3 or 4 months later when she asked for £500 as an emergency, but I didn't hesitate to send it to her because I thought it was building part of our future together. When I say I spoke to her regularly, I mean, as I've said, not once but maybe twice or even 3 times a day. She always looked to have a smile on her face when I called or she called me. I felt bad when she didn't answer because I knew what position she was in, but she said she didn't really want to have to do that anymore and she couldn't wait for me to get back and take her out of that world. I couldn't wait to do that either, but I didn't know how. I'd have been back for about 8 months at this point, and we're talking all the time, and she's become my world. It was a conversation we were having around that time. I was telling her how much money I had in terms of everything, and she was like saying, "That's amazing. With that amount of money, we could open a business in my hometown and we could probably build a small house. You'd be able to live a great life out there, and it would be good for me as well because I could live with you and my kids." When she said that, I didn't believe her. Not because I thought she was trying to get money out of me or get things out of me, but the thought of being able to spend £50,000 and get a house and business. There was no way that that was going to be possible, but she kept talking about it and telling me exactly the things you could do. Her village, she said, was very close to a body of water like a lake or reservoir or something like that. She couldn't describe it properly, but she said it was a popular place for local people to go, and they had restaurants dotted around, and it would be good to have a restaurant at a place like that. It did sound like a wonderful idea. She even showed me pictures where it was, and once she was there visiting the family, she showed me around there as well. It looked like the best setting in the world. She showed me her village, and she even put me on the phone to speak to her parents. I couldn't believe it when she did that, after everything I'd heard. I thought she must be really serious with me. But at the time, I didn't think it. I knew she was really serious with me, because she was introducing me to the people that mattered most to her. She was showing me where she came from, what the school was where she went as a child, and it was an incredible feeling. Like I'm loved for the first time. I don't know if I need to mention it at this point in the story, but remember the part of the story that I just said when she introduced me to her parents on the phone, and I was speaking to them on the phone. It's important to remember that. But after she showed me around and I ended the call with her, this was about 9 months after getting back, speaking every single day and sending money every month, I'm starting to think it would be stupid to not take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I should also point out she showed me a house that we could build for the amount of money that I had, and the business could be set up for half of that as well, so I would still be left with £10,000. I thought that would be enough for a year in Thailand, plenty of time to get things set up. But I didn't even think that far because I'm thinking, I can go to Thailand, live with the love of my life in a wonderful location, in my own house with no mortgage, while we ran a business together. What more could I want? You have to think at the time that I'm speaking with her, I'm working that same job. 1 minute I'm picking up the phone and speaking to some business somewhere in the country, trying to sell them a little bit of space in this online directory. Yet at lunchtime, I'm transported back to Thailand with her, and I started to think maybe this is the right thing to do. There's nothing here for me anymore. If I work like this for another 10 years, my mortgage should just about be paid off. And then what? Die? No, I was in love with her, and she was in love with me, and doing a business with her, and having our own house. This was like the stuff dreams were made of. Even with all this in mind, I still didn't rush into things. I read more stories about how things went wrong. Yet when people are talking about how things went wrong in their stories, or how they got scammed or lost their money, they seem to be guys who didn't respect their girls properly. They seem to be guys who just expected to be able to walk all over the girls, and their girls should do exactly what they wanted to do at the drop of a hat. They expected to move to the village and do everything their way, not how things are done in the village. And I wasn't like that. I considered her my equal. I considered village life to be something exciting and unique. So everything that was different about it would be a cause of excitement, not annoyance. So as much as I read and took heed of all the warnings coming my way, I just felt like the guys in the stories sounded like fools because they were looking for something that didn't exist. They were looking for a girl that perhaps was a girl in appearance only, yet without any of the mental capacities to have her own opinions. Perhaps they were looking for a robot. I wasn't. I was looking for a real girl. Not only that, I found one, and she loved me. That was all that mattered. And I think it's extremely important for me to explain this because there will be guys out there as well, just like me, who think that their girl is different, who will think that their ideas make everything different. You have to stop tricking yourself. Even if you don't think you're tricking yourself, understand that you are, because I was and I didn't know I was. So I'm trying to help you, even though it will fall on deaf ears to guys who want to do something similar. 2016, I was going to be going back to Thailand. I told my girl and she was so happy, so excited that I was going back. When I told her, she even let out a little squeal like this was the highlight of her year. It was my highlight of the year, so why wouldn't it be hers? She talked about how much she hated doing what she was doing, how much she loved that I was helping to support her and her family, and when I told her I was going back, it was like everything I thought it would be. I asked her to meet me at Bangkok's airport, and she said she would love to, so I sent her a little bit of money so that she could get there. She got a taxi from Pattaya, and that was fine with me. And when I got off the plane, I can remember having a huge smile on my face as I was walking through, looking around at everybody else, thinking I'm here to meet the love of my life. I'm here to meet someone that loves me more than anybody will ever love you. That's how sure I was of things. And I walked through and I see her standing there and everything seemed to fall in place. She had a really sweet smile, and even though we hadn't seen each other for a year, she acted like she'd seen me yesterday. She came over and hugged me and said, "I can't wait to spend time with you." We had a few days in Bangkok before going to Pattaya, and of course the conversation started turning to me moving to Thailand and hoping to do this business in her hometown and have a house. I asked if we could go up to Ubon after we'd been in Pattaya for around a week. She was staying with me all the time during this time, not going anywhere else, not doing anything else. Yet she would get calls coming in and she would decline them, and everything she was doing with me, that's how I thought it was. I came first. She didn't hesitate, saying let's go and look at her town. And we got a taxi to Bangkok and flew from there to Ubon. I loved the first impressions of the town, very Thai, and we stayed in a hotel in the city. Her village was quite a way away, but it was very cheap to get transportation to go there, and she said, "Let's go tomorrow." I couldn't believe it. This again made me feel like what I had was real, whereas other guys didn't. I hear other guys saying that she wasn't prepared to introduce him to her family. She didn't want to take him to the village. But here I was, going to the village with her, right here, right now. I was going to meet the family. I was going to look at the place where we could build a house, and the place where we could start the business. And I could escape my life. That was the main thing, escaping my boring life. I couldn't believe how happy I was feeling. When we set off to the village, everything was great. We found a guy to drive us. He would stay and take us back later for just 2,000 baht for the whole day. I thought that was a very great price. We get there and she says her kids are at school. Obviously, it is the middle of the day, a Thursday or whatever it was, so her kids weren't there. And we made it to a little small house. Very basic, but there was a little old man sat there. She introduced him as her grandfather. I did all the nice pleasantries, everything like that, but he told her that her parents weren't there at the moment. They've gone away for a few days. She looked really sad when he said that, Like, I told them I was coming. My children are at school, and then he said, no, your parents have taken your children away as well for a getaway. That's how she translated it to me, obviously in very different words to that, basic words, and she looked sad but said, never mind, we can't do anything about it. And though, yeah, I thought it's just one of those things. She even called her parents on the phone, and she was talking like, maybe putting on a bit of an accent like, oh, why didn't you tell me you were going away? What happened? And she just said that they were sorry, but we're not going to be here by the time they come back. That was a really upsetting moment because I wanted to meet them, but I didn't think anything of it and thought, well, never mind. I think that was the moment I could have saved myself. All I needed to say was, can we go and look at your parents' house? I want to see what it's like. I think that's all I would have needed to have done. Because the thing was, she showed me her parents' house quite a lot of times when we were speaking together when she was up visiting. So I knew what it looked like. But I didn't ask. I just said, oh, whereabouts is the land we can build the house on? She went to show me, and it was really nice. It was down a dirt track. Like you go off the paved road onto a dirt path for a few kilometres, and then at the other side, there's another paved road. There were a few houses there, and there was an electric cable running along the side of the road, all down this dirt track. About halfway down there, that's where the plot of land was, and she said it belonged to her family, and if we want to build a house on it, we can. That was a really exciting moment seeing that land, and she's been very affectionate and nice with me, like holding my hand, like, can you imagine us sitting outside here having a few drinks in the evening? Can you imagine sitting inside the house watching a movie at night? Maybe my kids can have their own room. She's saying all the right things, and yeah, I could definitely imagine it. Next, we were taken to the place where she said we could have a restaurant, and it was very different than I thought it would be. Even though I had seen pictures on calls, it was like a big lake, and there were a few small wooden shack-style buildings dotted around, and she went to speak to someone. And he was told that if we wanted to rent a piece of land here, we could. It would only be a very negligible amount of money, and a small amount more we could build a structure for the restaurant. It was about 10 to 15 minutes away from the village, so it wasn't too far. I went far more far than that every day at work at home. But it did become apparent that we would need some kind of transportation to be able to get back and forth. We returned to Pattaya, and I'm very close to thinking that this is what I want to do. I only had 4 days left in Thailand with her, and I was starting to feel really sad. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be without her. And the thing was, it felt like she didn't want to be without me even more than I didn't want to be without her. It was awful being in that position, so madly in love, head over heels for this girl who was going to go and have to go back to work again when I leave, and that fills your mind with all kinds of hideous thoughts. The following day, I asked her to marry me. I said these actual words, please make me the happiest man in the world and marry me. Those are the words I used, and she smiled, a really big smile, and said she'd love to marry me. I couldn't believe it when she said that. That was getting me one step closer to this perfect girl and the perfect life, and just like that I was engaged. The first time in my life I was engaged, and not only that, it was to the most perfect girl ever. We didn't have enough time to get married then, but I promised I would come back as soon as I could. And I made up my mind, let's start that business, let's get ourselves a house, and let's start living permanently together, because we belong with each other. We love each other so much. She was in floods of tears when I left. I tried to keep it together, but I was sad, and just like that, I went to the airport and flew back home. As soon as I got back, I called her. I sent her a bit of money straight away, just to show her I was thinking about her. And she's talking about the house and the restaurant, and everything is sounding so perfect. And then we start talking about the marriage. About how if we get married first, then we can go and do the house, and when the house is built, we can do the restaurant, and there should be just enough time for the business to start make money before my money runs out. Everything made perfect sense. I mean, everything sounded so perfect. I told her I'll come back as soon as I can, and I've already made my mind up. I couldn't wait to marry her. I couldn't wait to build the house, and I couldn't wait to start that business. The very same day, I put my house in England on the market, praying that someone would buy it quickly. When I had an offer 3 days later, for the exact asking price, I took it, and then it was just a waiting game. I told her that the house sale was going through, and I explained to her in England it takes a long time for something like that. We were speaking every day, and I'm still sending her money, and everything is coming together so incredibly well. Of course, I'm the happiest I've been, and I can't wait to get back to Thailand to be with her. She seemed to be so happy. Like every time we'd speak, she has a huge smile on her face, and I can't believe that my life could change from being so boring and dull to being so exciting and different. I never spoke to anybody at work about me going to Thailand, but this time, when everything was ready and I got the money from the house, I quit on the last day of the month so I didn't need to give them my notice. I wanted to do something to get a bit of a leg up on them for paying me so badly all those years. I just walked into the office and said, "I'm moving to Thailand, bye," and I walked out. Of course, I made sure I got my salary first. I had to move out of my house that day, and I still had a few things I wanted to sell, everything packed in my car. So I thought to myself, it's only a few days, I might as well just sleep in the car while I sort things out. It wasn't a very fun experience, but it did help save me quite a few £100. That could buy us a great TV for the wall of our house. That was my mental reasoning. I booked the ticket to Thailand, and I booked an open return, just because I needed an onward ticket. I didn't do it because I thought it was a good idea. I didn't do it because I wanted to spend that little bit of extra money. I didn't do it for any other reason apart from the fact I needed an onward ticket. It was the most sensible thing I ever did, even though it wasn't intentional. But she knows I'm going back, and she's so happy. I get on the plane, and I can't believe I was on the way to Thailand, and I was going to live there forever with my dream girl. My dreams were actually coming true. How many times have you had a dream and had the same dream again and again and again, and no matter how much you dream it, it never comes true? Yet my dream was actually coming true, and all the guys who had lost so much in Thailand, I had no idea what they were doing. They obviously didn't have a proper girl like I had. They didn't respect that girl like I did. They didn't do anything properly. And I was in a position now where I felt like my life was finally starting. I'd waited all these years, and life was finally moving in the right direction. I landed in Thailand, and she was at the airport waiting, and the first thing she said to me was, "You make me so happy coming back to Thailand to be with me. I love you so much. Thank you so much." Everything that you could want to hear, that's what she said, and I told her how much I loved her as well, and I can't wait to start this new chapter of our lives together and grow old with her. She said we needed to go back to Pattaya because she needed to go and quit her job. I kind of hoped she'd done that before I left, but I did understand that she had to be careful. What would happen if I didn't actually arrive, and she'd have a problem then. But we got a taxi to Pattaya and checked into a hotel, and I went with her to the same bar, where the other girls in the bar were wishing us good luck. What more could I think? It was all real. Of course it was real. I'm being wished good luck. The other girls are giving me a hug saying, "Take care of her. You've got a good one here. Good luck with your business up in Ubon." Everything was said. Made me even more sure I was doing the right thing. And I was happier in that moment than I was before. Everything was fitting into place. The following day we went to Bangkok. I'd already spoken to an agency about getting married, and they were going to help me. I'd already spoken about this with my girl, and she was happy, and we went along to the agency together. They gave us a list of documents that we needed, and I went away to get the ones I needed from the embassy, and she got the ones she needed, and we went back a few days later. "You're missing one piece of paper," the agency said. I had everything I needed, and she had everything she needed, apart from a little document that indicated that she changed her name when she was younger. I don't know why she changed her name, but the name on her birth certificate and the one on her ID card were different. She said it was something to do with her mum changing her name for good luck based on the advice of a monk. Something like that. You hear something like that when you're so madly in love, you actually feel like it's sweet, instead of thinking, "Damn, that's insane." She had no idea where to get the paper from, but it was informed that she had to get it from the district office where she was registered, which still happened to be in Ubon. It wasn't much of a problem, or so I thought. So the following day, we fly to Ubon, check into the hotel, and it's already too late to go to the village and the district office, so we thought we'd sort that out tomorrow. That was the first time I actually had a good look at the town of Ubon, and I really liked it. I felt so special as a foreigner to be somewhere like that, because you didn't see many other foreigners there. I felt like I owed my girl so much for introducing me to this part of Thailand that so many people don't have the opportunity to go to. I could see myself being there for the rest of my life. That's what I was thinking was going to happen. It was such an amazing time. The next morning she left to go by herself to get the paper. But she called me about an hour later saying she had some bad news. They said it's going to take about a month to get this paper, but don't worry about it. We can just get married in the village first, and then we can get married on paper after. It was only a small hiccup, and that sounded okay with me. And she came back, and we went together to the village. We got the same guy we got before to drive us there and wait until we were ready to go back, and she took me to her parents' house. They were there this time, and she introduced me to them. That was the first shock I had. If you can remember, I had been introduced to her parents on the phone before, on a video call, and I had distinct memories of what they looked like. Me being me, I even took a screenshot of it, just so I could remember what they looked like, and if I ever saw them, I could be respectful to them and make my girl happy. But these two people did not look anything like the ones in the picture. "Are you sure these are your parents?" I asked. "Of course they are," she said. "Why wouldn't they be?" "Can you remember you introduced me to your parents on the phone before?" I pulled out my phone and I found the picture. These people look very different. She looked at the picture and smiled and said, "Of course they're my parents in the picture. Who else would they be?" I'm looking at the phone as clearly as I can, and I'm looking at her parents. They were not the same people, but she insisted they were. So she grabs the phone out of my hand and points the phone at her parents and says something, and they start nodding. They start nodding their head. And then I look at them and smile and sort of indicate my eyes towards the phone as if to say, "Is this really you?" And they start nodding their head again. Perhaps it was a different light. Perhaps it was a bit blurry because it was on the phone and it was a screenshot of a video call. I don't know what it was, but I believed her. Looking back, there was no chance she pointed the phone to her parents and said what she actually told me she said. She obviously said something very different, so they would nod their head. But I didn't speak a word of Thai, so how did I know? But in that moment, I was so sure that they were telling me the truth, I just laughed at myself and thought, shows what I know. That's the scary thing though, if you think about it. It was clear indication that something had happened and some lie had been told, yet I overlooked it and chose to believe her even though it was clear she was lying. Madness. After that little incident, we talked about getting married. I hadn't even met her kids yet, but I had read stories about the sinsot that guys need to pay and how guys hate having to pay it because it's not part of their culture. As far as I'm concerned, we were in Thailand. I actually felt proud to be paying this, and I offered it first before they even asked. I just said to her, I understand things are different in different countries. In my country, it's not normal to do something like this, and I understand it in Thailand. If you've already had a relationship and you already have children, then perhaps it's not required in the same way, but I am willing to pay. I'm happy to pay 200,000 baht, but that's it, and no more. There was some back and forth with her and the parents. These were her real parents. That one is definitely true. And they agreed and thought it was fair, so that was sorted. We stayed there for the rest of the day. Her kids come back from school and she introduces me to them. That was a very weird situation. She was 27 or around and she had 3 kids. I was 55 with no kids. But it was nice to think I was going to be some sort of father figure for these kids until they left home, which was going to be at least 12 years for the youngest. It was arranged we would get married in a week's time. It was a very auspicious day coming up, so if we did it on that day, it would be good. And I gave them 100,000 baht to pay for everything that needed to be paid for. Before we go any further, the people who she introduced me to as her parents on the phone, I think were just some friends in Pattaya who played the part. I found that out later. But we're staying in the hotel in Ubon. A week goes by, and we go and have the ceremony. Everyone's happy, everyone's getting drunk, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. I also feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world, and I have the best girl ever. She seems to be so happy. Our marriage was solidified in the place that she came from, and I felt like I was showing the utmost respect, and she was allowing me into her world. It felt incredibly special. After this happens, immediately we start talking about the house. We went to look at the land again, and this time we went with her parents. Everything that was indicated seemed to be like this. This is yours. They clearly indicated it was mine and hers. It's yours, build your house and enjoy. There was no indication of paperwork or the land being on my wife's name. I could call her my wife now because we were married in the village. There was no indication of anything like that. But as long as it belonged to the family, I didn't think it mattered. I was really happy at that moment, thinking like in 6 months' time, we're going to have a house here and I'm going to be living there. Not only that, we're going to have a business. It was such a wonderful time, but things would go downhill from there, and the speed at which they would continue to go downhill would be so rapid that I didn't even have time to catch up with them. Construction starts on the house. I left it all to her. She was from there, and I wanted to give her the respect that she should have. Although I was paying for it, she knew about everything that I didn't know, so I left her to build it, and it was coming along well. I agreed to spend 1 million baht on the house and furniture. So it was only going to be a small 3-bedroom bungalow, but that was great. We'd have a bedroom, her eldest could have one, and her 2 youngest could share the other. That sounded like the best solution, and the house is going up as you'd expect. Everything's going perfectly, and after 2 months, I remember this paperwork that she had to get from the district office. Just kind of said to her, "Oh, I forgot, don't you forget as well, you need to go and pick up that paper so we could get married properly." "Oh yeah, I forgot about it," she said. "I'll go and have a look." So she went straight to the district office. At the time, I'm watching the progress of the house, and she comes back and said there's been a problem. They got me the wrong paper, so it's going to be another month now. At this point, I'd already extended my visa for 30 days. I came in on the exempt, and I'd had to leave the country and come back in again. I was hoping to get the marriage visa arranged. But we weren't married, so that would be difficult. But I didn't think anything of it because these things happen. It's Thailand. I still had this weird third world attitude towards Thailand, like, yeah, it's going to take a long time. It is Thailand, so just forget about it for the time being. Don't think like that. The house came together incredibly quickly. I've never seen something built that quick. 3 months total to build it and decorate. And during this time, there's been another delay at the district office for this paper. So that's adding to the stress and worry. But again, I write it off and just deal with the annoyance of juggling my stay in Thailand until I can get the proper visa. I kept asking her about the business. When are we going to do that? And she said, I think it's best that we wait. But if we invest the money first, then at least it will be ready and in place. We talked a bit more in depth about it, but I agreed to put the business money into her bank, so it would be ready for the business when the time came. Again, I am asking, where is this paper from the district office? And again, there's another delay. I went with her to the district office, but the problem was I didn't understand Thai, so she could have been saying anything to them, and I'm starting to get a bit upset now because we were meant to be married months and months ago. The problem is it's going on and on and on just trying to get this paper, which I've since learned should be available within 5 minutes of speaking to an officer at the district office, but I didn't know that. I just put it off as being an annoyance, nothing more than annoyance, and we're spending time in the house and I'm hoping to start the business soon. We really need to get married first, so it's just playing a waiting game. At this point, I had to fly out of the country to re-enter because I couldn't do another border run, so that was annoying as well. But when I'm with her, everything's great. Until everything wasn't great, and things turned around so quickly that you wouldn't even believe. I loved her more than life itself. I would have done anything for her. All I wanted to do was spend the rest of my life with her, and I built a house, and I put some money in her bank for the business that we were going to start soon. She was my world. All I wanted to do in my life was be with her. That was all I wanted to do. I have no idea who she really was. I don't know how someone could behave in such a way like that for all those months, all those years even, a few, of being my dream girl. But it all came to a head one evening. She'd invited up some of her friends from Pattaya to see the new house. They brought quite a few bottles of whiskey with them. There were 3 friends and her and me sitting outside the house on a small table, just talking. They're blabbering away in Thai, I'm speaking English with a huge smile on my face, and very happy to be surrounded by these beautiful girls. And her kids were staying at her parents' house that night. I'm getting drunk. I'm getting really drunk. And the girls seem to be drinking a lot as well. I don't know how drunk they actually were, but I'm having the time of my life. I probably had a third of a bottle of whiskey, yet I'm still coherent and able to speak and laugh and joke, and one of her friends comes and holds my hand and says, "I think you need to go and lie down." "No, I don't want to go lay down, thank you, I'm good here." So, yeah, I had a few more drinks, they had a few more drinks, and we had one of those Thai barbecues, mugatat, cooking meat on some kind of pot over hot charcoal. And then an hour later, I can still remember, sort of, but I wasn't, walking very well, I was that drunk. And her friend came over and said, "I think you really need to go and lie down now." So she grabs my hand and I think, yeah, I probably better go and lie down, I'm too drunk. So she takes me to mine and my wife's bedroom, and she just looks at me. I can't remember exactly the exact details because I was drunk, but this is how I think it happens, and she says something like, "I think you're drunk, you better lie down." I kind of just slumped back onto the bed, closed my eyes, and then opened my eyes, 10 seconds later. I think I said something like, "You drunk true, go in the other room or living room or go away." But that's not what she did. She did something else. And 5 minutes later, there's an almighty shout, "You cheating on me with my friend?" Wow. I didn't know what was going on. I was too drunk. I think I was even laughing, saying, "Don't be silly. I'm just lying down and she's doing this. I didn't want it." And then she said, "I don't believe you. You no good now, you no good man. Just the same everybody." And it goes on for a few more minutes and then I fall asleep. In the morning I wake up and all hell breaks loose. Her friends have already gone. I've got the worst hangover I've ever had and she's just screaming at me. "I can't believe you cheat on me in our house. I bring you to my family and my village and you cheat on me with my friend." No matter what I said or did, she wasn't having any of it. I was drunk. I didn't do anything. "What happened to your friend? Maybe we need to speak to your friend. You think I want to speak to my friend ever again after she do that to me?" All this stuff is going on and I just hope she'll calm down because I've still got the huge headache. "Can we speak about it later?" I ask her. "I didn't cheat on you. I would never do that. I love you more than anything. If your friend did something like that, I didn't ask her to come. I was really drunk, you know I was." "I'm not stupid," she said. "Nobody do like this if they don't want to do. I'm not stupid, you really bad man. I can't believe you do this to me." I was really not in a fit state to talk with my huge headache, so I just said let's talk about it later, and I went back to sleep, kind of hoping when I woke up it would have all blown over. But it hadn't. She demanded that I leave. "I never want to see you again," she said. "I can't believe you do this to me after everything I do for you." "I don't want to leave," I kept telling her. "I built this house for us. We can't have a business soon." "You just cheat on me in this house," she said. "How can I stay in this house with you after you do this?" It appeared like she'd already made up her mind. I kept telling me how I made her look like a fool in the village, how I married her in the village and everybody will think bad of her now. How anybody else would know, I don't know, but that's what she was saying. That's when it hit me, though. That's when it really hit me. I think it was all a setup. It was when my world just came crashing down. It was all a setup. How convenient was that for her to get me drunk, invite her friends, who all worked in the bar where she used to work, over to the house that I'd built, get me drunk, then she could use that as the perfect excuse to get rid of me. That's when my heart stopped, and no matter what I said, she wasn't having it. I was a bad man. I made her look bad in the village. I cheated on her in our house. Everything she could say, she wasn't having any of it. I'd been silent for a minute or so, just shocked. I just looked at her and said, "Did you do this on purpose? Please tell me." But she wouldn't admit to it. She just kept saying, "I never want to see you again, get out of my house." "What about the money for the business?" I kept saying to her. "What money for business?" she said. "You told me you give me that money because we got married. You cheat on me. I not cheat on you." "Seriously," I said, "you're going to do that to me?" "I'm not doing anything to you," she said. "You cheat on me." That was when I knew it was all over. She could probably just say to the village, "Oh, he's gone back to work in England and I will still speak to him. And then eventually things will settle down and she's got a house and money out of me." I couldn't believe it. And then you think about the district office, the paper with the change of name. That paper wasn't forthcoming for months. Perhaps she didn't even try to get it. But she really did have me where she wanted me to be. Could I go to the police and say this girl scammed me? That's what I threatened I would do. I'll go to the police, tell them you stole my money. She started laughing at me. You cheated on me in my house. I have proof on video that you did this. You built this house because you wanted to, for me. And you put the money in my bank. Then you cheated on me. And you farang. The only actual word she used was farang. Everything else was more garbled, broken English. The type of English that she spoke before that you found extremely attractive. And now you think it sounds so annoying when they speak. I begged and I begged and begged for hours and hours. I even stayed another night just praying and hoping. But it was a setup, plain and simple. She had everything I had, and that was it. That was it, I couldn't do anything. I left down to Bangkok and just took stock of what had happened. She played me. She played me so well that there was nothing I could do about it. Unless I wanted to go to jail, which I was close to thinking it might be worth spending the rest of my time in jail, but then I thought probably not. I had hardly any money left. The last thing I did, though, was go to Pattaya, to that bar, to those friends. I walked into the bar and it was quite full. I started shouting, "How could you do this to me?" They just pretended not to know me and I was escorted out by security. That was it for me in Thailand. Luckily, I had that return ticket that was open. I had to spend £100 to change it, and I flew back to England a broken and devastated man. Ever since then, I've lived Thailand through the internet. I love listening to stories about how other people have been done in, but I haven't heard one as insane as mine. A complete setup from the start, and I missed all the signs. She had the perfect excuse in the village why I can't go back. If it was actually a game, she played it well, but she ruined me. And in 2025, what do I have? I'm working a similar job, only I'm renting as opposed to having my own place. And I rue the day that I ever went to Thailand. It destroyed me, and so did she. The worst thing, after everything, all the stories I read, all the research I did, I ignored everything because I thought I knew better. A single 55-year-old man from England who worked an awful job all his life thought he knew better than everybody else. Who the hell did I think I was?